This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions over Israel's war with Hamas continue to grow.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. On a busy travel holiday, we will have much of that today for you. Paul Sweeney and I welcome you all across this nation commuting. Do you think anyone right now is inflicting us upon their children?
I think so.
They're commuting. They need to know where dollar yen is.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
The kids are like, are you kidding me, Dad?
Where are the futures this morning, Tom? We got a lot of economic data today that everybody's going to be keyed into.
Yeah, we're going to really
so we'll bring that to you, Tom.
Yeah, at 8:30, we'll really focus in on that huge raft of economic data, and it'll be market moving. It's a shorter volume a day, but really we welcome you across the nation and celebrate the beginning of this holiday. We're going to start in London. Seema Shah is going to be with us in a moment. We got to talk to her about Chutney Mary, Thanksgiving at Chutney Mary on St. James. You know,
it's nice. Okay.
It's like a destination kind of Thanksgiving
Love that
thing.
area.
And for people in London that don't need turkey, don't need the beast. We welcome again all of you. Red and green in the screen, the VIX 14.34. What do we got here? Gura's, I don't think Gura's with us today.
No? Is he back down?
He made an appearance. We continue equity coverage. Bob Dahl will be with us. That's important.
Yep.
Rob Sokkin on the economy. Whitney Tilson will be with us.
Yes.
A mountaineer, I should say. He's climbed about everything.
Okay.
Whitney Tilson, but not on investments.
No.
He's running for mayor.
Exactly. Mayor of New York City. Good for him.
Top line of his list is crime for all of you across the country.
Good for him.
A mayoral candidate that wants to do something about it. It's the beginning of the season.
Very good.
Already. So we say welcome. Michael Barr, particular welcome. He's out with the Lions getting ready for their big Thanksgiving game. Lisa Mateo's been up since like 2 a.m.
I know. Just working hard.
She went right from Moana 2.
Yes.
Right over to, you know what we're doing. She was. Did you survive Nathan Hager? It's difficult.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely. Easiest person.
Well, we'll have to see. From the Interactive Brokers Studios, our Bloomberg Business News. Here's Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We're seeing a little bit of a lift in some of the markets right now. Dow futures, little change, but they're up about 6 points. Now, NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, 66 points. S&P futures down about 0.1% or 8 points. And this is all as traders take in Donald Trump's latest cabinet appointments. They also look ahead to more economic data for clues on the outlook of interest rates. The 2-year yield, 4.22%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.27%. And that's down 3 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.3%. We have the Japanese yen up more than 1% at 151.42 against the dollar. The euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin up more than 1.5%, just about over 93,000. And so much for a revival in the personal computer market. Dell Technologies reported worse than expected sales. Its shares are down about 11%. And meanwhile, HP, it said an increase in component costs. That was the main reason why its profit outlook in the current quarter fell short of estimates. Its CEO did say that price of the parts should decline as the year goes on. Shares of HPQ down about 9%. And Arabica coffee futures extended their rally, hitting the highest since 1977. I think I was about 3 years old. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Like, I don't know if I can go on with the show.
No.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. So I was in London once for Thanksgiving.
Really?
Which is sort of strange.
Yes.
The Kensington, in South Kensington, they're doing the full American thing here, plus a bourbon tasting in the K-Bar.
That sounds...
And then, if you don't want to do that, you go to Chutney Mary over at St. James.
Yep,
I love this. The Blueberry Cosmopolitan, the Spiced Old Fashioned, and Kerala Roast Duck or Lamb Curry. Joining us on this eve of Thanksgiving from London, Seema Shah joins us this morning. Seema, is there like a Thanksgiving in London? I mean, is it like a happening thing?
Good morning, Tom. It's becoming a thing. So I remember 10 years ago it wasn't, but certainly now I think everyone wants to celebrate every single American holiday.
Exactly.
Can I ask why?
Yeah, exactly why.
Why?
I think any little joy.
All right, Seema, we woke up here, a few weeks ago. We had a new administration coming in, a new president elected. We've got a Republican Congress seemingly pretty well in place here. Did that change the way you over in London and the principal global investors looked at the market broadly?
Actually, it didn't. And I think this is not so surprising in a way that it didn't, because what we were thinking ahead of the election, and typically what you see through history, is that one, it doesn't really change the narrative too much, but specifically in this election, what you did see, it reinforced a narrative that was already in play, in that of US exceptionalism. And I think the news that we've had since the election results were announced, it has simply exaggerated and exacerbated that idea of US exceptionalism, where the rest of the world starts to struggle, but the US really does prosper.
Seema, are we creating a wall of worry? The cardinal rule is you don't go up unless there's a lot to worry about. It seems like there's a lot to worry about, transition in politics and even in the investment world as well. Do you see a healthy wall of worry that can drive us higher?
I mean, I think that there are certainly worries. I think there's a lot of reassurances there as well, though. You know, if I think about fundamentals, which is really what's going to drive the market, at least going into 2025, we know that the economy is looking really, really sturdy. Earnings growth is strong. The worries that are out there also do have the potential to hit some of the fundamentals. So the tariffs could, of course, have an impact, but really primarily on the other countries, not so much on the US. And then the other thing that we need to watch for, which does have, I think, a considerable risk ahead for risk assets, is going to be what happens to inflation. And of course, that is also related back into this policy proposal.
Paul, at 8:30, the second look at September 30 ending GDP survey on 2.8%. Looking for that one more time here, 2.8%.
Exactly. That'll be coming at 8:30, Tom. Seema, what do you think this U.S. Federal Reserve is going to do in December and heading into 2025? Because, boy, the economic data coming out of the U.S. seems, I guess, pretty darn solid.
Absolutely. I think that they have been surprised. I mean, clearly, when they cut by 50 basis points in September, they were not expecting the economy to be this strong. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone in such a magnitude. We are expecting there to be another cut in December, though. And that is the idea that they just want to kind of very gradually move towards a less restrictive perspective. I think there are a couple of risks in the economy, mainly around the low-income consumers and some niggles around the small businesses, which could start to get worse if they don't get some assistance. But come January, because of the overall strength of the economy, overall strength of the labor market, plus the potential risk of upside inflation moves next year, to me, that says that they need to tread a little bit more cautiously. So I think come January, they move to a more gradual pace. So that means moving every other meeting. And there is certainly a potential for a higher floor than what markets and the Fed were expecting just a couple of months ago.
So, Seema, someone's doing, John Tucker, help me here. Worst drive from hell today, I-95. Really in either direction?
Oh, I was stuck on 3rd Avenue going north. It was 3 blocks yesterday for like an hour.
Seema Shah, I-95, you're popping from Boston down to New York today. Drive from hell, New York up to Boston, further drive from hell. Halfway up, just past Groton. You know where the submarines are, Paul?
Sure, yeah.
Just past Groton, Seema Shah. There's the argument over the 401k. Dear, what are we going to do with our underperforming dog? What do you do to reallocate a dog retirement plan in America?
God, it's such a good question. I think that is such a headache for so many people. What do you do with your retirement plan, especially at these kind of valuations? So from our perspective, again, really think about those fundamentals. Markets are expensive, but there is still some opportunity ahead when you start to think about earnings, when you think about the growth trajectory. We do need to be a little bit careful, though, because there are, as we said, there's risks on the horizon. So it really does argue for some kind of diversification.
Like what? Come on, don't give me a time. I get your strategist. You're not going to do that. But what's the Seema Shah allocation for the couple just east of Groton heading up to Boston, and there's silence in the car? John Tucker, you've experienced this.
There's always silence in my car.
Yes, thank you. Seema, what's the principal allocation?
So we're thinking mainly on US equities from an equity perspective. You're looking globally that you want to have some exposure to some other markets like India and Japan. We would be staying fairly clear of Europe and China for the time being. Then from a fixed income perspective, I know fixed income is a little bit of a harder story at the moment because as it is, money market funds are delivering so much. But we do think that there's an opportunity to extend your duration a little bit, start to think about investment grade, even high yield, because the backdrop is quite strong. So there are opportunities. And then the other thing is, and this is really important, is that there has to be some kind of exposure to real assets. as I said before, the risk on the horizon is really around inflation. You want to have some kind of inflation protection in your portfolios. So whether that's real estate, commodities, there has to be some kind of resilience within the portfolio as well.
Seema, Kevin on YouTube, live chat, says, tell Seema to go to the J.P. Morgan Thanksgiving lunch in London.
Solid.
Gabrielle Santos is there this year. She's a token American.
That's an invite. I'm there.
You know, there it is. Thank you, Kevin, for that. The J.P. Morgan Thanksgiving lunch in London.
Very good.
James Diamond shows up.
Yep.
They used to do Swanson TV dinners with Diamond. Remember those?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
With, you know, the potage was just amazing. With our news in New York City, here's John Tucker.
All right, guys, President-elect Trump continues to fill out his administration, tapping Jamieson Greer as U.S. Trade Representative. Well, let's get details on that from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
The selection of Greer highlights the central role tariffs will play in Trump's economic agenda. He's a longtime protege of Robert Lighthizer, and he was involved in Trump's first-term trade policy decisions, including steep duties on China and the negotiations for a partial trade deal with Beijing concluded shortly before the outbreak of the pandemic. Greer is now expected to play a pivotal role in implementing the president-elect's tariff plans, including 25% levies on Canadian and Mexican goods, as well as an additional 10% on existing Chinese tariffs. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
Trump has also selected Kevin Hassett to lead the National Economic Council. More on that from Bloomberg's Brendan Murray.
Hassett was head of Trump's Council of Economic Advisors in his first White House. So this is the sort of economic think tank behind the White House's policy decisions. He would have been involved in designing the tariff rollout in the first Trump administration, trying to make sure that the products that had tariffs imposed on them didn't become inflationary. So it was trying to be very selective in that process.
Bloomberg's Brendan Murray says Hassett's appointment does not require Senate confirmation. A ceasefire underway in Lebanon, Israel and Hezbollah pausing a 14-month conflict that's killed thousands and forced more than 1 million to flee their homes. President Biden says he hopes the truce will lead to a permanent end to the fighting.
Civilians on both sides will soon be able to safely return to their communities and begin to rebuild their homes, their schools, their farms, their businesses, and their very lives.
President Biden there speaking from the White House Rose Garden. I have no idea how this is going to work, but Burger King jumping on the Advent calendar trend. The BK Advent calendar has 12 surprises inspired by past and present menu items and iconic campaigns. It costs $19.54, a nod to when Burger King was founded. A Burger King Advent calendar. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg.
I think I opened December 24th once on December 5th and was beaten.
Do you go to hell when you open the wrong box?
And
how does
folks,
that work?
Through wide acclaim out on YouTube, what is a Thanksgiving like at the Mateo house? Tell me it's not gluten-free.
No, it is not. We go to my aunt's house and she cooks up everything. It's a Puerto Rican feast.
That's great.
We have everything. Pernil, pasteles, rice and beans. I mean, you name it, it is there. And I indulge. Because in moderation, it's a holiday. See?
Listen to you, in moderation. Emily up the Hudson River, who invented this with me years ago, her parents inflicted on her, are you ready? Tofu turkey.
No, a tofurkey? No.
Tofurkey, is that what you call it?
Tofurkey, you do, yes.
I'm learning, Paul, tofurkey, I think somehow no.
No, thank you.
No. Dark meat, we'll talk about dark meat and white meat. Safe commute across America, good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. All right, we've got futures mix. The attention turns to a lineup of pre-Thanksgiving U.S. data. We have a read on the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, initial jobless claims, and also an update on economic growth. Now, according to minutes from the last policy meeting, Fed officials showed support for a careful approach to rate cuts. We head to NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 61 points. S&P futures down 0.1%, 7 points. Dow futures little changed, up about 14. We have the 2-year yield 4.22%, down 3 basis points. A yield on the 10-year 4.27%, down 4 basis points. Brent crude up about 0.2%, $73 a barrel. WTI crude $68 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,653 an ounce. And the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.3%. Shares of cybersecurity company CrowdStrike Holdings, their shares down 4% this morning. This is after it issued a weaker than expected fourth quarter forecast. Now, this is the company's second since that July update that you remember crashed millions of devices that were operating on Microsoft's Windows systems. And finally, shares of Sanrio, that's the brand owner of Hello Kitty, they fell the most since May of 2014. The company said its holders, including its presidents, are going to sell shares in the open market. Its shares are down 14%
So now
in Japan.
It's goodbye Kitty.
Goodbye Kitty, not Hello Kitty. Yes. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Out on YouTube, help me here, Lisa. Tofu turkey is even worse than turkey. Have you ever had a tofu turkey?
I haven't, but it seems like it would be dry. I don't know.
I don't know. Poor Emily. It was a very difficult childhood. We say good morning, and this is important. Paul and I, we get it all the time. Do more equities, talk about Apple, Dan Ives, all this. Right now, folks, the global litmus paper is a foreign exchange market. Yes. And Paul and I are really committed to talking to what on Wall Street's sort of obscure. They're brainy, they're Irish. It's ugly. But the answer is foreign exchange matters, and the heritage of HSBC on foreign exchange is extraordinary. Darryl Meyer had to fill David Bloom's shoes. This was a tough act to follow, and he joins us this morning. I want you to explain to mere mortals what you learn when you wake up and you look at dollar, DXY, Bloomberg Dollar Index. You look at the majors, euro. What are you trying to glean out of the daily tick-by-tick dynamics of foreign exchange?
I think actually you're trying to avoid getting trapped in that morass, right? Because otherwise you'll just chase the latest headline. And sometimes you just need to step back and go, look, what is the big picture? And
right.
I think... I tease Steve Major, on the fixed income strategy side. I say
you
that...
You guys are on speaking terms?
Yeah, we still speak.
Thanksgiving.
30 years
exactly.
later. And I think the art of fixed income strategy is to take something simple and make it sound very complicated. and maybe in FX it's the other way around,
that's
right?
the act.
So maybe that's the other way around in FX. And, I think the story on the dollar is pretty simple. We're in a strong dollar environment. Now, every so often, as you say, Tom, you wake up, you'll see a headline pointing the opposite way. Do you respond to that every time? No, you can't. You'd age so quickly. So that's it. Step back from the morass and see the big picture.
Trump trade by the dollar here. The Mexican peso, the Canadian dollar, they've taken it on the chin here over the last several weeks here. How do you view those currencies?
I thought it was really interesting yesterday what we saw when we had the Trump tweets. And it's a word I don't often use in foreign exchange. There was a sophisticated reaction, right?
Okay.
Because the simple reflex would have been, let's just buy the dollar. Trump's talking about tariffs, right? But actually, and we did see that initially, but then we saw it evident and sticking really only with the Mexican peso and the Canadian dollar, right? So in other words, the market wasn't kind of painting every currency with the same brush. It was saying, hold on, this is a Canada story, this is a Mexico story. So in a way, that's heartening, right? Because it means there is this level of sophistication coming in where we're identifying, in a way, who loses out in this story. And I thought that was quite encouraging, I would say.
So is there any bear case for the U.S. dollar here over the foreseeable future?
There's a couple of angles, right? I mean, President-elect Trump likes to talk down the dollar. So, if he gets on the wires and saying this strong dollar is killing us,
Right.
there will be a reaction, right? If he gets back on the wires and says the Fed should be cutting rates by 50 basis point steps again, what's going on? Those of course that's going to have an impact. The thing is, well, what we found when we looked at the data, it tends to have a fleeting impact, right? So you of course, as a trader, you're going to respond to the headline, but what are you going to do 2 hours later? So that angle gets you to a weaker dollar temporarily. But it's hard to find the really long-lasting dollar bear case at the moment.
Quickly, what's your call on euro dollar right now? 6 months out, 1 year out. What's the HSBC?
Tom wants parity.
Well, we've got better than that. We're going to do the Walmart trade. 99 cents. It's yours.
Okay, 0.99.
Yeah.
Weaker euro. I want to know what the elite political reaction is going to be in Paris, in Frankfurt with Lagarde, in frankly London, in Dublin, to a 0.99 Darrow-Mayer euro.
I think they like it, no? I mean, it's they don't have this...
They don't have to defend the euro. OMG, we came at 116.
No, you've got a weak economy, right? You've got a weak economy that might have a headwind of tariffs. A weaker exchange rate alleviates some of that. I don't think the bulk of the ECB is particularly preoccupied with headline inflation, at least. And I think the politicians, I think they'll embrace that as a helpful tailwind to an economy that is otherwise struggling on a number of fronts. It's, we've been much, much lower in euro dollar historically, so I don't think they'll be viewing it as this is a euro project question mark. This is just a strong dollar environment.
Right. Let's go to the other side of the world. The Japanese yen here. We're having a strong day today, but it's been noticeably weaker. A weak yen here. What's the call there, do you think?
The call there, unfortunately, after relying on Steve Major, and that's never something you want to do in life, right? No, but it is a treasury call, right? That's it, and we're seeing it again over the last few days, and this morning is that dollar yen tracks the treasury yields. I think where it gets interesting is when those begin to split apart, and we saw that ahead of the MOF's intervention earlier this year. When that gap gets big, then I think you get trigger happy at the MOF. We're not at that point, and this morning's price action, if anything, kind of closed what little gap was beginning to emerge there.
Are there big figure moves in EM? Like, I've been so busy this morning dealing with Lisa and her gluten-free Thanksgiving dinner. If I go USD, say PHP, but I mean, Philippines is its own soap opera going on right now. They're not out to a 60 yet, but a lot of EM is right there. Sing dollar, Indonesia. Are they going to break through to new weakness? I mean, not 1998, but still, are they going to break through to new weakness?
Well, definitely our view on dollar Asia is it grinds higher.
Grinds.
Yeah, it's a grind. And, I guess as well, to come to your earlier question, step back from the minutiae. The story, I think, is we've already had a pretty big adjustment in the dollar over the last 2 months. So I think what we're seeing at the moment is a little bit of risk taken off the table ahead of Thanksgiving, ahead of tofu turkey or whatever, toe turkey. Well, I've already forgotten what you've got. Wow.
Lisa's out.
Oh my goodness, that's just killed my day. Anyway, I think you get a bit of risk coming off the table on that. So it keeps some of that pressure off EM for now. But I think the big picture is strong big dollar. It's going to be tough for EM.
The Pilgrims came over. They had a case of Guinness with them. Have you embraced Thanksgiving here in America?
Do you know I haven't? But what I do embrace, and I know I should have. I should have gone much more native. I know, not all of them, but I do embrace the day off.
Yes.
And that said, I said to my wife, so will we have turkey, actual turkey tomorrow? And she said, yeah, but there's only 2 of us. I'll go out and try and find a turkey crown or turkey breast.
Right.
She's come home with the whole turkey. So I'm eating turkey for 5-6 days. I suspect so, yeah. Embracing it this year.
Jerome Schneider at PIMCO turned me on to literally concrete huts in Texas where they smoke the turkey.
Yeah.
It's outstanding. It's like scary good.
I like the fact that Americans deep fry turkey. I thought only British deep fried everything.
We just heard from Wisconsin out on YouTube live chat. I've never, Lisa, have you ever deep fried anything at your house?
No, but I've seen that go really bad sometimes, like catching fire. It's kind of dangerous.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Darrow-Mayer, have a great beginning to this long holiday season. I see a little bit of turkey.
Yeah, sure.
Like Paul, when I have turkey, I lay down in the living room, like my father used to do. It does something to you.
Sure.
The chemicals or whatever.
The stuffing, the
tryptophan or whatever it is.
You're ready for a nap after.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's where
Lions
we are.
football, though, Tom.
Lions football. Michael Barr on the sideline. He's been helping their defensive line. That's been beneficial for him. It's a sabbatical for Barr. Red and green in the screen, key economic data in 1 hour. It'll have an effect on Darryl Myers' foreign exchange market. Stay with us from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures mix, and this is after the Dow and S&P closed at new highs yesterday. The Dow for the third session in a row. So let's start with Dow futures. Little changed, up about 15 points. We have S&P futures down 0.1%, 7 points. NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, or 62 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.21%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.26%, and that's down 4 basis points. To commodities, Brent crude $73 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,652 an ounce. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.3%. We have the Japanese yen up more than 1%, 151.37 against the dollar, and the euro British pound stronger. Few companies making news. OpenAI allowing employees to sell about $1.5 billion worth of shares. It's a new tender offer to SoftBank. That's according to CNBC. And 7&I shares, they're higher. They're up nearly 1% in Japan. This is after a report that KKR may take part in a bid for the company's supermarket unit. And finally, sources say Starbucks corporate workers, well, some of them are only getting 60% of their overall bonuses for the company's most recent fiscal year, and that's due to the chain's poor financial performance. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Logan, thank you for the very kind comments out on YouTube. We celebrate with all of you across the nation on your commute. This holiday, the beginning of the season, of course, worldwide on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. Paul, which oil do you use to fry a turkey?
No idea.
I learned you don't use olive oil.
You don't? Okay.
Vegetable oil.
But yeah, canola or peanut oil. I'm learning.
All right.
It's on fire. I mean, a lot of people are doing this. I can see this at the Mateo house.
I know, absolutely. Who knows what goes on?
Red and green on the screen, 1 hour away from important economic data, and joining us for that brief, Rob Sockin, global economist, Citigroup. The great missed call this year, and my economist of the year is Lindsay Pieggs over at Stifel, because she was like, look, I'm sorry, rates aren't coming down. Really aggressive, really. Like what Andrew Hollenhorst was like, rates are going up higher than anybody thought. He was 100% correct. And Lindsay's saying, we're not coming down that fast. To me, that links into nominal GDP, which is the animal spirit of America. Where's the doom and gloom with Rob Sockin on nominal GDP? I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, when I look at the consumer in the U.S., we're seeing a very strong performance. And we're not only seeing signs that the consumer is still strong, it's a broadening out consumer. We've had services spending being really strong over the last few years. Now we're seeing goods spending as well. So it's a broadening out picture, not one where the consumer's rolling over.
Doug Irwin, the giant at Dartmouth, was with us yesterday on trade. I mean, he owns the high ground on free trade. And he was heated that if there's a slowdown in northern Ohio, there's some other part of America benefiting from that slowdown. Do you people at Citigroup agree with that?
Well, it's a complicated picture. If we end up in this environment where trade is being very challenged, a broad-based tariff environment, we've written a bit about this. I think it's on net a negative for the U.S. economy, on net a negative for the global economy. Now, if you have some targeted tariffs and there's a little bit of offsetting effects, you can have other emerging markets coming in with other production. If you got more tariffs on China, for example. But if we end up in some type of tariff war, I think it's a net negative.
So today we're going to get a whole batch of economic data. I think the core thing for the marketplace and for the Federal Reserve is that core PCE annualized basis coming in expected 2.8%. Is inflation under control from the Fed's perspective, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's how it sounded in the minutes. They don't seem too worked up about inflation. Now, as you said, we're still running above target across all inflation measures. So, we're not quite there yet. But I think from the Fed's perspective, there's been enough progress to probably at least lower rates a bit further. But once you get past that December meeting, I think it's going to be really challenging. And if you get stuck in that 2.5 or above range, the Fed may start having a different conversation around that. Right now, that's not where we are. I think services inflation, which is the area that's still a bit sticky, will continue to decline. But you've seen other areas. Look at Brazil. I mean, Brazil proved much more resilient than expected. Australia inflation is proving much more resilient than expected. So we're seeing other parts of the world where inflation is being a bigger problem than we originally envisioned.
So is U.S. exceptionalism from an economic perspective, is that still a thing?
I think it's still a thing. I mean, when I look across developed markets, U.S. economy is up 11-something% in real terms in this cycle. Australia is the next best performer, a little bit behind it. Europe's up a few percentage points, and I think that's likely to continue. When you come back to this consumer dynamic, really comes down to the strength of the U.S. consumer. U.S. consumer is where the exceptionalism is, and when we look at the fundamentals there, that's likely to continue.
The heritage of Citigroup economics, of Rob Sockin, of Catherine Mann, now at the Bank of England, of the giant Willem Bouder, is to do think pieces where you pause. It's 15 pages, it's 20 pages. It's like, OMG, this is actually thoughtful. Nathan Sheets was in the other day with your brilliant piece on rising American household net worth.
Yeah,
I did the chart in the Bloomberg, did log, sent regressions back 30, 40 years, and it's just amazing how persistent our growth of net worth. Can we keep that going? Seems to be this gloom, OMG, we can't keep it going. I just don't buy it.
Yeah, I think it can keep going. To your point, I mean, that's one of the fundamental reasons the consumer's been so strong. If you look at U.S. net worth, it's very high by international standards. If you compare it to something like the Euro area, much lower, and there's also seen no gains in the cycle. The UK even worse. And I think with the US, if you look, I mean, equities, our equity strategists see scope that equities can keep going higher. Housing prices are still rising. So I think for people who have those assets on their balance sheets, they're doing very well.
Well, that goes to the K-shaped economy out there. And how big of an issue is that for overall? How does the data capture the fact that there's a large portion of the population that doesn't own stocks or bonds or real estate and those things?
This is one of the biggest challenges for macroeconomists is that we'd love to have better data on the distribution of performance. How are lower income consumers spending versus higher income? What we do have is that the lower income side is showing more strain. They're not gaining from those balance sheet effects that we're talking about. They're hit harder with high interest rates and high inflation. But I think even there we're likely to see improvements, and probably the worst is behind us, because as long as the labor market holds up well, inflation's moderated a lot, interest rates are coming down. So I think there's more strain there, but it's likely to improve.
So claims, I'm looking for it, Paul. There's so many lines of economic data. Claims on this Wednesday, 215,000 is a survey. Forward moving average is what I use. It isn't budged. What number do you and Andrew want to see on claims where you go, okay, the labor market's broken? It's way higher, right?
It's way higher. It's
That's
at least
scientific.
Yes, scientific term.
CFA.
It's at least 250 and on a rising trajectory, and that's been a big difference. Is the unemployment rates moved up in this cycle, labor markets have loosened, but compared to other cycles where the unemployment rates moved up materially, you just have not seen layoffs in this period, and I think that's very different from prior periods where the unemployment rates moved up. And as long as we're not seeing that layoffs, we're likely not going to see recessionary conditions. And as long as the consumer is strong and still spending, it's hard to see why companies would have layoffs at a large scale. So I expect that layoffs are going to remain low, and that number is very low.
Paul, I got to interrupt. You get one more question in here. Flight Aware, their misery map.
Yep.
Delays have exploded, I say. I'm kidding, folks. We're up to 93 delays, 4 cancellations. Are you ready? Newark leads the way.
Yeah,
what a
no
shock.
surprise
Continue.
there. So, I mean, given all that backdrop there, Rob, what's our Federal Reserve going to do? What do you guys think our Fed's going to do? Are they going to go slower than maybe the market's thinking, or maybe a little bit more aggressive?
To me, it's a pretty challenging environment. I think they've been pretty clear they're not going to take on board any expected effects of Trump 2.0 until they see the effects on the ground and actual policy being announced. And I think that makes sense because there's so many different policies being talked about. A lot of them have opposite economic effects. I think December we're likely to get a 25 basis point cut because there's been enough progress. After that, it's going to depend on the economic data. I still think you get a few more cuts early next year, but we'll see how inflation evolves and the consumer evolves.
40 seconds. Blake Snell to the Dodgers. I watched him at the Padres. It's real simple. By the second pitch, you know that Snell's on his game, 20 strikeouts, or he blows it up, whatever. It's great. That's not as big, Paul, is Kate Moore joining Citigroup, announced yesterday. What are you going to do with Kate Moore other than she's got to bring her dog to work?
I don't know. I think Citi's been making a lot of very good hires. I think it's a pretty good-looking future, in my view.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of upside.
She's gone to the wealth management business there.
Wealth management.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, I have a lot of exciting moves.
She's tough. Tell the employees she's vicious.
Yeah.
She's tough as nails.
She'll be good there.
I'm kidding. Rob, thank you so much. Rob Socken.
Worst elevators
with Citigroup Global Economist. And Kate Moore of BlackRock will be joining Citigroup. I don't know when she's on garden leave, till the garden comes in.
Spring training.
Kate Moore to join Citigroup Wealth. That was announced yesterday. We'll effort her as she becomes available. Red and green on the screen here on this Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The VIX shocking near 13, 14.19. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. Let's start with President-elect Trump continuing to fill out his new administration. He's tapped Jamieson Greer as U.S. Trade Representative. Let's get details from Bloomberg's Gina Cervetti.
The selection of Greer highlights the central role tariffs will play in Trump's economic agenda. He's a longtime protege of Robert Lighthizer, and he was involved in Trump's first-term trade policy decisions, including steep duties on China and the negotiations for a partial trade deal with Beijing, concluded shortly before the outbreak of the pandemic. Greer is now expected to play a pivotal role in implementing the president-elect's tariffs plans, including 25% levies on Canadian and Mexican goods, as well as an additional 10% on existing Chinese tariffs. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
And Trump is putting a familiar name in charge of his National Economic Council. Kevin Hassett chaired the White House Council of Economic Advisors in the first Trump administration. In a statement, the president-elect says Hassett will help families recover from inflation and renew and improve his tax cuts. A ceasefire underway in the Middle East. Israel and Hezbollah have entered into a temporary truce in Lebanon after weeks of U.S.-mediated talks. And Bloomberg's Germana Bersenci is following from Dubai.
It is temporary in nature. It's going to be only 60 days long. And the terms stipulate that Israeli troops have to gradually withdraw from the southern border of Lebanon. This is a gradual phasing out of troops, it should be stated. In addition to that, Hezbollah also are required to retreat 30 kilometers away from that so-called blue line demarcation as well.
Bloomberg's Germana Bersenci reports negotiations will now begin for a more permanent truce. The Vatican and Microsoft have unveiled a digital twin of St. Peter's Basilica. It uses artificial intelligence to explore one of the world's most important monuments, while at the same time helping the Holy See manage visitor flows and identify conservation problems. They use 400,000 high-resolution digital photographs taken with drones, cameras, and lasers over 4 weeks when nobody was inside the basilica. The digital replica is going online alongside the 2 new on-site exhibits to provide visitors real and virtual with an interactive experience. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, and Lisa.
John Tucker, Thanksgiving on the deck, Atlantic Highlands. I mean, it's great. You get off the boat, you start right in. Do you have the lobster bisque before the bird?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Well, you don't have to necessarily do turkey on Thanksgiving.
No, we don't. Yeah,
I'll probably do a ham, I think, in addition to a few others.
Very good.
Maybe some lobster tails.
Tell me you're not frying
lobster
the ham.
Tails.
I mean,
nice.
they're light. You don't fry a ham, right?
No.
Nobody fries a ham.
Okay, whatever
Ham?
Lisa tells me.
It's un-American.
Mine are pre-cooked. You just heat it up. Spiraled.
John Tucker.
Ready to go.
On the deck,
Very good, very good. Cuisine with John Tucker. Red and green on the screen here. Seriously, in 45 minutes. I mean, Paul, it's like a Wednesday. Trading is like what, half volume?
Yeah, I mean, we're the only.
Except there's like this really large amount of economic data on the pulse of America.
Let's get Mike McKee in here.
We should.
Yeah.
He can give us the forward view to.
I'd rather have Lisa Mateo with
December 30th.
newspapers, but I've been told we're doing Michael McKee. We're talking economics.
Can we do both? How about that?
Yeah, maybe we could do both.
We'll do both.
Who
Good
made
morning
that
to all
decision?
of you in your commute. Good morning on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, on Sirius 121, Sirius XM 121. Good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, 92.9 FM in Boston, leading the way with flight delays. Boston, JFK right there with them right now.
As soon as you
Newark
get a
behind
breeze
them.
up there at Logan,
Yeah,
it
this
goes
is supposed
crazy.
to, like tomorrow rain or, so who knows. Stay with us from New York City with key economic data coming up. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures mixed with a focus on Donald Trump's cabinet picks. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 54 points. S&P futures down 0.1%, 6 points. We have Dow futures, little change, down about 13. The 2-year yield, 4.20%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%, and that's down 5 basis points. To commodities, we have Brent crude, $73 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Okay, Lisa, thank you so much. Lisa, take a break after being on since 4 a.m. This morning, and we got a special guest sitting down here with Michael McKee. This is what Thanksgiving's about, folks. The gift of Thanksgiving came to me early. Right now, Bloomberg Surveillance, we're brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to interactive brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest. IBKR.com/RIA. Joining us right now on the economics of this nation, Michael McKee running all of our coverage. You killed it the other day. Susan Collins and Austin Goolsbee in the same day.
Yeah.
Intellectually, that's a lot of work. And joining us, I saw him on the street. I'm walking down the street. The Bentley's broken. Steve Ratner's walking by me. And joining us right now, Stephen Ratner as well. You see him often with Joe and Mika with the best charts on economics on TV by a mile. Steve Ratner, what's your favorite chart right now to describe America 2025?
Wow, that's a great and quick surprise question. I'm not sure I can boil it down to one, but I think if you were to summarize America now, you'd have a chart showing that the GDP is still expanding nicely. You'd have a chart showing that unemployment is at a low level. You'd have a chart showing the stock market is at record levels. And you'd also have a chart showing that most workers are not much better off than they were 4 years ago, if at all. And we have a big challenge when you have a record stock market, but the average American not seeing his income going up. That's not where you want to be.
Sets up Mike McKee perfectly. Then how does Jerome Powell and the Fed execute a unified policy for two Americas?
Well, they don't really do that. Their basic job is to keep inflation down. They can't do anything about what Steve's talking about, which is that incomes need to rise. Incomes are rising, but we've just got this cumulative inflation over the last couple of years that you need to catch up to. And the interesting thing is that, of course, the psychology, and you've heard this before, is that price increases are done to me. Somebody raise prices on me, but any raise I get is because I'm good and I earned it. And so people don't equate the two things.
Steve, we woke up several weeks ago with a new president, a new Congress. Did that change the way, or to what extent did that change the way you had viewed these markets and these opportunities over the next several years?
Yeah, look, that is obviously the great question. It is what we are spending a good part of our days thinking about at the moment. You have a variety of ways to think about it. You have some on a more granular level. You have the so-called Trump trade, which I know you guys know all about, and I'm sure have talked endlessly about on the show with folks, of sector stocks and so on that will either benefit or not benefit. But more broadly than that, you have the question of what are his policies actually going to be, and you have some conflicting dynamics going on here. You have his idea of extending tax cuts and so on, which would stimulate the economy, create more growth. But at the same time, we've got a $2 trillion budget deficit, and adding more fuel to that fire does risk inflation not getting all the way down to 2%, risks it even going up, and it equally importantly risks interest rates taking another leg up. They took a leg up after the election. They've moderated, but if people start to see trillions of dollars of extra deficit, you could see them go up, and that is high interest rates are the enemy of the stock market, as you guys well know.
To both of you, and Mike, you and I know that somebody would mention the dollar, and Chairman Greenspan would go, "This is not my remit." Unfortunately, it is. To me, it's a litmus paper of the system, and the surprise next year could be dollar dynamics. Does President-elect Trump and Jerome Powell, do they want a weak dollar? I mean, do they want a strong dollar? Do they care?
It's very hard to know what Donald Trump cares about, because it's hard to know what he understands about dollar dynamics and the economy. Jay Powell obviously would say a stronger dollar is good in the sense that it holds down inflation. Too high, and then you have a contraction in the economy, perhaps. One of the funny stories over the years is a very senior Treasury Department official once, when I was covering Treasury, said, you guys are always reporting that we want a strong dollar and it's in the best interest of the United States. But you notice we never say what it is? What's a strong dollar?
Okay, but Steve, politically here, there's a really important thing. The president-elect has had a history of coming out and saying, let's boost exports, and with the tariff debate and all that. Is he praying for a weak dollar? Do you, in your career, going back to the New York Times and all that, do you see any evidence a president can jawbone the dollar weaker?
No, the president can't jawbone probably the dollar weaker, nor stronger. Look, it's become a mantra for Treasury secretaries to say that a strong dollar is in the national interest. It feels good to have a strong dollar. It is a sign of prosperity. It's a sign that we're competitive with the world. But as you intimated before, the flip side of it is that it makes it harder to export our goods. It makes it easier for us to suck in imports. It does have a moderating effect on inflation. But you can raise the question of whether too strong a dollar is in the national interests. And at this point, because of what people are expecting on interest rates and stimulus, we have a dollar that is very, very strong. And I think there's an argument that a less strong dollar would actually be helpful at this moment.
Michael McKee, 8:30. You're going to get a whole slew of data. What are you looking for here? Inflation. What do you think the Federal Reserve is going to look at in this inflation print today?
Oh, well, they'll be looking at the 10 o'clock number, PCE, and they already kind of know what it's going to be. It's fairly easy to figure out PCE once you have CPI and
he's an
PPI
economist.
coming
That's
in.
what they do.
And,
I had no idea.
And so we're going to see a slight rise. And basically, it's going to confirm what we saw with CPI and PPI, that inflation has stalled out a bit above the Fed's target. The question is, does it go down from here? What is driving that besides housing? I was asked earlier today about the whole housing and owner's equivalent rent. And the Fed isn't going to ever say this, but they're essentially looking through that part of it now, because they know it's out of their control and it doesn't really affect people on a day-to-day basis. You're not buying a house every day. So in terms of what they're doing, they'll look through that. But I'll tell you what the most interesting number to watch going forward is that we get at 8:30 today was sort of to wholesale and retail inventories.
Oh, listen to you. Ratner's going to walk out of the studio.
Exactly.
These are
it's so
he can go
nerd.
make a chart of this. These are things that nobody ever pays attention to, but we should see an increase because these are going to be October numbers, and companies were pulling in a lot of stuff to prepare for the port strike.
Right.
And now, if you're going to believe that Donald Trump might carry through with his tariffs, companies are going to start stocking up on goods and sticking them in warehouses when they can get them at cheaper prices. So those are two things to watch to see the progress of all of this.
Michael McKeon again with us here in 35 minutes. Stephen Ratner, thank you so much. Stopping by quickly, of course, Mr. Ratner. Writing the charts. Mika fell off her chair a couple days ago because he was doing charts. He did logarithmic charts with Joe and Mika. It was just it was just scary, unbelievable. But Steve Ratner, thank you so much, and have a great season as well. We got lots to talk about here into this key economic data. 24 lines on the ECO screen on the Bloomberg terminal. Michael McKee will rip that apart for any and all. Thank you out on YouTube. Thank you for our new digital distribution out on YouTube. We really appreciate it. Paul and I are sort of like basically blown away by what we've seen in the growth of YouTube. It's been a great present for us this year. On the commute across this nation, drive safely is the first thing. We're watching. There's not drive aware. There's flight aware.
Yeah, drive right. Just be careful. Drive defensive. Drive defensive.
Yeah,
That's what
remember
my dad
that?
told me. Just
that
drive
was like
defensive.
old school.
Yep.
Yeah, drive defensively. That's what we're doing as well. We need to get you started here, and we do that. Where else do you start it with? Mr. Armstrong, Ms. Fitzgerald, good morning.
Dreamers with empty hands may sigh for exotic lands. It's autumn in New York. It's good to live it again.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
Have we achieved the soft landing? Has the Fed kind of done its job?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Fears over a broader regional war in the Middle East.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Got to be quick here. Bob Dahl coming up on the equity markets. How to invest. Should you be fully invested into 2025 in 29 minutes? Key, a plethora, Paul.
I know.
Of economic data. We're going to get right to a special guest appearing in moments from the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, El Mateo.
And we got futures mix. Traders taking in Donald Trump's latest cabinet appointments. Also looking ahead, we have more economic data on tap about a half hour from now. NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 49 points. Dow futures little changed, up 13. S&P futures down 0.1% or 6 points. The 2-year yield, that's at 4.21%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%, and that's down 4 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.3%. A hit to the PC market. Computer giants Dell, HP, both reporting sales that were lowered. We have Dell down about 12%, HPQ down about 8%. And shares of software company Workday falling down 11%. It issued a disappointing forecast. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I greatly appreciate it. We're looking at FlightAware. Domestic flights actually pretty good now. Joining us, surveillance on $5 a day correspondent Charles Pellet joins us. Charlie, I just looked at my New York-Paris junket, United 5756. I've never seen it so cheap.
How
under
$2,800? That's nuts.
Fancy class.
Oh, of course.
Business class.
You know, you're a big guy. You need the extra leg room. Not like me. I, on the other hand, have seen flights as low to Europe, not necessarily Paris, but in the $400, $500 range if you're willing to travel off-peak, if you're willing to travel in January, and you're clearly
Where are you
not.
going next?
Got a trip to the Middle East, specifically Israel, coming up in January, going for a coffee and a beer. Plan to do that over Martin Luther King weekend, and heading up to New Rochelle over the holiday
New Rochelle,
weekend.
you need a passport.
And one quick question. You said you got the special guest coming up. I'm hoping it's Bob Dahl.
It's Bob Dahl.
And
Yeah,
not Charlie
it wasn't
Pellet.
you. Charlie Pellet to exit. Let's listen from Paris.
Éloignez-vous de la porte qui se ferme.
There we go. Stand clear of the front. It's so great.
I know. It sounds better in French.
Macron's people called up and they said, "Can we get that Charlie Pellet doing the exit from
Yeah, we're working on a deal right
Paris
now.
subway?"
Yeah. Contracts
Very good.
under.
Joining us now, taking notes, about ready to leave to go fry the beast, Bob Dahl with us here from Crossmark as well. Bob, you have so been through this. I led the show by saying we're generating a new wall of worry. Do we need a wall of worry to move higher in equities?
We certainly have that wall of worry, and that has moved the markets higher. Policy, what's it going to be? We're in a period of high uncertainty, coupled with investor sentiment being a record bullish, coupled with valuations pretty high. So I think you need a little bit move toward the center a little bit. That doesn't mean have a lot of cash. I'm fully invested, but I've been trimming my financials, which I'm still overweight. I've been adding the healthcare, which I'm still underweight, just getting a little closer to neutral.
Bob, have you folks at Crossmark, did you change or alter or think about changing your outlook here post-election at all?
Well, yeah, it's clear to us, has been clear, and we saw this in the weeks leading up when the polls started moving Trump's direction, that Trump more constructive for growth, for the equity market than Harris would have been. Unfortunately, the other side of that is somewhat higher interest rates and probably a little higher inflation. So we have to balance out the positives and the negatives.
So where does that lead you, Bob, here? We're thinking about opportunities in both equities and fixed income. Where do you start here? How do you think about allocation?
So we want to have some of both. I'm coming back to this fairly neutral posture because we do not know what policy is going to be. If you do, please tell me that we'll implement it in our portfolios. I mean, there's a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico. Is that really going to happen? If it does, there are some adverse consequences. I hope it's a negotiating ploy. There's so many of those kinds of things floating around that it's really hard to know the path forward.
You were at Lehigh University, and this is just after Truman beat Dewey. You know, it goes back.
Okay, going back a little bit.
Goes back a few years.
Don't
Bob,
embarrass me.
Bob, help me here with the train wreck known as market timing. We need a redo on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving of the reality of market timing success.
Yeah, so it's pretty rare people have it. You know the saying, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. You and I have both seen so many people, as the market's gone up, get nervous, get out, and then forget to get back in. And that just happens over and over. So find good securities, own them in your portfolio.
This goes to Amy Silverman in the cross moments, Paul. A lot of fancy math, but the answer is it's behaviorally, it's wildly asymmetric, folks. It's easy to get out. And as Mr. Dahl says, it's so damn hard to get back in once you get out.
Go ahead, Bob.
I would add to that, even with a view that over the next 5 to 10 years, stocks are going to have subpar returns because we're starting at high valuation levels and high profit margins. Even if that comes true, stocks are still going to be a good place to be relative to almost anything else.
Yeah, but the critique of that, and good morning, David Costin and Goldman Sachs, for that storm 6 weeks ago, is you're modeling in recessions and slowdown, right, Bob? How do you do that?
In the next 5 to 10 years, we're likely to get a slowdown/recession. Look, I'm not at 3% where Mr. Costin is. I'm using 5, which is sounds bullish compared to 3, but compared to 10, the long-term return, it's not a strong number.
Earnings, Bob, what did you take away from this earnings cycle and maybe some of the guidance we saw from corporate America?
Yeah, I'd say overall the numbers were good relative to expectations. But I'm starting to hear noises of, you just reported 2 of them, HPQ and Dell. You know, these are not the first companies. Had some retail companies recently say, consumer not so good. I think we'll see some weakness in the economy and therefore weakness in earnings. Another reason of these valuation levels to really make sure you're in companies that are going to deliver the earnings and the cash flow.
Bob Dahl, MAGA, we were making a joke about Truman and Dewey. I'm sorry, this MAGA thing is pretty darn original. It's just like a new for Bob Dahl and myself. What is Bob Dahl with MAGA? Do you hold it? Do you marginally add? What do you do with those big tech stocks?
So my view is they are going to be modest underperformers as a group next year, coupled with the fact that equally weighted averages beat the cap weighted averages. I know in my portfolio, on days when the NASDAQ and the MAG 7 do best and the Russell 2000 lags, I lag as well. But when the Russell 2 beats the NASDAQ, which of course is the MAG 7, I have a good day. I think we're going to see more days like that.
Bob Dahl, thank you so much with Crossmark. Greatly appreciate the brief. Tandem. We had Victoria on yesterday.
Yep, Victoria Fernandez.
And Bob Dahl.
Yeah.
It's like back to back. It's good.
That's pretty solid there at Crossmark.
They're not on speaking terms. I mean, we had to go to two sets of people to this. I'm getting emotional here on Thanksgiving. I mean, I'm tearing up here on YouTube. People are saying such nice things about Lisa and Michael and Paul. Thank you so much for that. Nothing about me and John Tucker.
No.
It's like nada.
Exactly.
We got economic data here in 20 minutes. It's important. Also important, our news in New York City. Here's John Tucker.
Let's start off with the travel. The weather, traffic, other factors could get in the way of Americans' Thanksgiving travel. Let's get more in this report from Bloomberg's Courtney Donahoe.
Millions are flying and hitting the roads. The TSA expects to screen more than 2.9 million travelers today. But it's not the weather that's causing problems so far. It's a lack of staffing. Last night, flights at Newark Airport in New Jersey were delayed after the FAA issued a ground delay because of an air traffic controller shortage. United Airlines is blaming the FAA. The agency says it's ramped up hiring new controllers, but training takes time. Meantime, the National Weather Service warns the threat for heavy snow is increasing across the Great Lakes. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Donald Trump has named Kevin Hassett to lead the National Economic Council and Jamison Greer as U.S. Trade Representative. Hassett, a major supporter of tax cuts. Greer has called for strategic decoupling from China. Trump's pick for border czar, Tom Homan, is promising to unleash a sweeping crackdown on illegal immigration and escalate enforcement along the southern border with Mexico. Let's find out more on that part of the story from Bloomberg's Amy Morris.
Holman, along with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, met with and served early Thanksgiving meals to Texas National Guard soldiers and Department of Public Safety troopers stationed along the border. Holman told the security contingent he'll work directly with Texas to ramp up security measures, and he says President-elect Trump will use executive actions to tighten immigration policy, including mass deportations.
We need to know who's coming in, what's coming in, where's coming in, why it's coming, all those questions. President Trump's one bad president to secure this border at a level we've never seen before.
The specifics of the plan aren't clear yet, and any program will likely need a lot of money from Congress, plus cooperation from other countries to accept returning migrants. Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
A 60-day ceasefire underway in Lebanon. Israel and Hezbollah entered the truce overnight. President Biden says he hopes it's going to lead to a more permanent peace, including with Hamas in Gaza. Times are pretty tough for Japanese car makers as China's assault on the world's automotive industry gathers speed. Japan's national champions emerging as some of the biggest victims. In China itself, the world's largest car market, Japanese automakers are fighting for survival as local competitors flood showrooms with wave after wave of electric vehicles. Speaking of cars, a lot of car owners queuing up on YouTube videos trying to fix their own vehicles. The cost of car repairs and maintenance has soared 28% in the past 3 years. But mechanics say the biggest issue for these amateurs is that diagnosing problems and clearing error codes on the cars requires software and tools that only the dealers have.
We go to, it's never under $1,000 correspondent Paul Sweeney.
Yeah, exactly.
What a racket, Paul, huh?
It is. That's why, I think that's where they make the margins. The car dealers make the margins with the service, not necessarily the sales.
So I got an email last night from Mrs. Gura. And, they're doing Moana 2 this weekend. They're taking their horde.
Yep.
And, where they live, it's not like, General Cinema or,
Park Slope here.
It's like the Nighthawk Cinema. It's some artsy-fartsy place where they do Wicked and Moana.
Yep.
They have cocktails there from Moana 2.
Oh,
to be sure
is that why you selected it?
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. How about the Together is Better pineapple coconut punch with a shot of, it's like a daiquiri, I think. It's sort of like, to get you through.
Yep.
And for the cherubs, the bacon, ube, and coconut sticky bun, bacon and ube jam filling, cream cheese, coconut icing, and shredded coconut. They're not going to get out of there for under $300.
Oh,
exactly. That's going to be.
I remember the old man would put us all in the back of the pickup truck,
go to
some
drive-in.
blankets, and go to the drive-in.
Go to the drive-in.
Back up.
This is
All
Park
set.
Slope. This is
You
Park. They do
you
things
go, can
differently
I go
there.
get the popcorn, which was $6, and it was the size of an oil drum because you just wanted to look,
no.
You wanted to look at the teenagers in the cars.
We brought our own.
That's tough times.
Are there any drive-ins anymore? Lisa, do you go to drive-ins? You don't even know what a drive-in is.
No, but they still have them. They do.
They still have them.
One on Cape Cod I go to. There's one out there in Brewster, I think, somewhere.
There's one in upstate New York, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, our sympathies to the Gura family.
Yes, exactly.
Gura's going to be on his third Together is Better.
Exactly.
Daiquiri. That at the Nighthawk Cinema. It's in Brookburg. It's over by Prospect Park and all that. Red and green on the screen. In 15 minutes, why you're here on a Wednesday and your holiday travels really across America and on YouTube here. We're really going to slow down at 8:30 because, frankly, we're doing 2 days of economic data, and we're not going to squeeze it into 1 minute. We're just not going to do that to you. Stay with us here, 15 minutes away. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures mix, and this is as the attention turns to a lineup of pre-Thanksgiving U.S. data. That's about 15 minutes from now, and that includes a reading on the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, initial jobless claims, also an update on economic growth. Now, according to minutes from the latest policy meeting, Fed officials showed support for a careful approach to rate cuts. We'll start with NASDAQ futures down 0.1%, 30 points. S&P futures, little change, down 2 points. Dow futures, little change, up about 37. The two-year yield, 4.20%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.25%, and that's down 5 basis points. With the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down 0.3%, we have the Japanese yen up 1%. The euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin just over 93,000. Shares of cybersecurity company CrowdStrike Holding down 2%. The reason for that? Well, a disappointing earnings forecast. And then shares of Sanrio, the brand owner behind Hello Kitty, it fell the most since May of 2014. The company saying its holders, including the president, they will sell shares at the open market. Shares are down about 14% in Japan. And finally, a company making news, that's BYD. A leaked email screenshot. It showed that the Chinese automaker asking suppliers in China to accept 10% price cuts from January. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. For the next 45 minutes, we are commercial-free to you across this nation, on YouTube, in America, and worldwide as well. Ian Bremer for a substantial conversation after the economic data. So much to speak to Dr. Bremmer about, including the news that we saw of Lebanon, Israel, and Hezbollah here overnight. Right now, before the economic data, this is really good because it's the when of it. Eagle Asset Management is with Raymond James.
St. Pete.
And it's not the advantage, like just like you say, Paul, they're in St. Pete and they're not, in the 3 zip codes of New York City, but it's the when of it. Eagle Asset Management has been doing this since 1976. They were way out front in boutique management of high net worth. James Camp joins us right now. Thrilled to have him with here on Fixed Income. James Camp, how is management of a pot of money different now than it was in 1976 or 1986?
Well, Tom, good morning to you. I hope I can start in 86 because that's when I graduated college. In 76, I was living underneath the high interest rates with my family, as you remember. And I remember a
14% T-note or bond.
Exactly. Continue. So as we moved away from targeting money supply to interest rates when we broke inflation, we have a whole different sort of income market, if you will. And that really showed up significantly in the post-financial crisis. I think the real sort of demarcation to me is moving from the financial crisis to the COVID moment, when that's where we had the repressive rates, the low rates, the negative yields around the globe. But managing money throughout that period, as you mentioned, to me, it's still fundamentals. It's still knowing what you own and what is the objective of the portfolio. We do get caught up in markets and indexes and the like, but the vast majority of the wealth clients that we work with have an objective function, and usually that objective function is around accumulation and then retirement income. And as I'll say, the retirement income situation just got a lot easier over the last 3 years, and I'll expand on that if you want me to. But the income markets look generous to me.
So, I mean, generous in the sense that you can sit there in a 2-year Treasury and get paid, 4.2%, or are you out there taking credit risks, James? Because we've seen high yield and leveraged loans be the best performing sectors in fixed income this year.
Yeah, Paul, it's both, actually. And the limited duration is a nice place to keep cash and near cash equivalents. But as we caution, the puck's going away from that market as the Fed has peaked. And we know post-Fed peak, both fixed income and dividend aristocrats, dividend growers, perform extremely well. In fact, we saw a lot of that after July when sort of momentum ceded leadership to some of the income equity. So both of those asset classes, to us, look very, very good. The one thing that's interesting is we're still seeing money flows into the money complex. And I think that's partially because we've disintermediated the banks. A lot of people are using money funds for checking, but there is an ample amount of cash on the sidelines, if you will, that is supportive of markets near term.
So how do we think about this, James? We're going to get some economic data today, maybe a couple of days of data pushed into one day here today. How do you think our Federal Reserve is going to move going forward? Because it feels like the economy perhaps is a little bit stronger than most people thought even 6 months ago.
Yeah, and we believe that as well. We believe that core inflation, structural inflation, is fundamentally different in a post-COVID economy. I think what the Fed has to do here is recognize, and I think they do, that there are really two disparate Fed policies. There's the accretive Fed policy for people with savings, as you just mentioned, for big companies that spend free cash flow and can park with accretive assets in your cash. And there's people that are indebted, small businesses, credit creation. Down market is more difficult. So I think the Fed is going to have to move short-term rates, but I don't think it's because inflation is hitting 2%.
James Camp, on this Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we're going to do a little different interview. James Camp is with Eagle Asset Management of Raymond James, and they have been devastated in St. Petersburg by hurricanes. James, you've put up $11 million at Raymond James towards hurricane relief. Your associates ponied up a good amount of money matched by Raymond James as well. Give us an update on the rebuild of St. Petersburg.
Well, Tom, thank you for that. And the legacy of philanthropy, dates back to our chairman emeritus, Tom James, and it's really part of the DNA of the firm that we're all very proud of. So thank you for that acknowledgement. What we see is really sort of an almost randomness to these hurricanes. There's streets where one or two houses are fine and three or four are not so fine. So what's happened is you've got communities that all across the region, because of flooding, because of wind, it's not a concentrated area. So it's very widespread. We're seeing tremendous amounts of lift from our nonprofit areas, from neighbors. Myself and my family, we have a garage apartment that has two young professionals living in it because their condo was wet, and we have another couple that is staying with us. So the big issue now is
let me interrupt. Paul and I have two kids, and Lisa's got a boring son. Can they shack up with you in St. Petersburg over the winter
I used to joke, Tom, that my kids can't come back from college and live in our basement because we don't have basements, but then we went and got a garage apartment. So we are able to help, and we're seeing neighbors help with. But really, it's about lodging and shelter at this point. But we're seeing just people step up. I've got one of my traders, his mom and dad are staying with them, and it's going to be a long period of time to rebuild some of these homes and to really sort of maybe recast, how we want to develop the coastal areas. And I think that's the longer wave conversation.
And Paul, I believe this is right. The Tampa Bay baseball team with that horrific stadium damage are going to play where the Yankees play spring training, which is frankly sort of cool. It's terrible, but to see Major League Baseball on a smaller pike like this.
But James, that's not stopping people from coming down to your part of the world, is it?
No, we're still seeing very good travel and tourism, which is the bedrock of the economy. And I credit, the local leadership in terms of cleanup, and it's a long 90-day type of window to get things back in order, but we're up and running. The beaches are reopening. We're seeing good travel and tourism, and everybody is sort of banded together. I will say, as a second property owner up in the high country of the Carolinas, those areas really are devastated as well. I mean, the second homes will survive, but the communities, the small towns, the areas north of Asheville and around Asheville, think about those folks this holiday season. If there's a way for you to express some support there, that would certainly be welcome.
With your decades there, James Camp, do you just predict the Florida boom continues?
I think Florida's going to have a little bit of a moment here where they're going to have to right-size their immigration and the development. And I'd like to see more conversation at the policy level and leadership level about things like insurance and how we developed our coastal regions. It's gone on too long where we've had this structural problem with insurance, and I think it's going to become more acute as a function of these storms. And we're going to need some serious leadership and some serious sort of conversations around how we do that in terms of making sure that we have safe homes, safe development, and that people can afford to be here, because it is a wonderful place to live with so many advantages. But we have a real issue here with housing and how we're going to do it going forward.
Thanks so much, James Camp, Eagle Asset Management, St. Pete, with a nice window into Florida. We're going to go souther from St. Pete down to Miami here later in the show.
Okay.
To the smartest guy on the planet on Bitcoin.
Yep.
How wrong was I?
Yes.
Mike McGlone can tell you how wrong I was.
I mean, your Bitcoin, Tom, you're at 93,500. We were pushing up against 100,000, right after the election, up from 60,000, close to 100,000. So it's this huge, huge move. So it's just amazing. So I think we'll see how this plays out. But it is clearly a risk asset. And I think that's kind of how folks are thinking about it here. You want to go long stocks, you want to take some risk, we can go long some Bitcoin as well. So it feels like, as Mike McGlone will tell you, more of a commodity than anything else.
Here's what we're going to do, folks. A date calendar forward here on your commute across America on this busy Wednesday. We're going to get to the economic data here in 3 minutes. Stuart Paul's going to join us with Bloomberg Economics. It's going to be really, really interesting to see his interpretation. A ton of economic data. We'll move on from that to Ian Bremer joining us for the entire half hour here to 9 o'clock. Dr. Bremmer will join us here on our international relations, touch upon the new administration and what we could see from Secretary of State Rubio. Assumed he is Secretary of State designate, I should say. And also, of course, the news that we've seen across Lebanon to the south, Israel, and down to Gaza as well. So an important 37 minutes here as well. Paul, this happens every year.
Yep.
That was a great movie. It's a baseball movie years ago. It happens every year.
Happens every year, okay.
But it happens every year. This wall of data on a Wednesday. But to me, this year's different because we've been so wrong on buoyant economic growth.
Yeah, the numbers, Tom, I think have come in just general economic activity, whether it's retail sales, whether it's inflation, whether it's GDP, better.
And you nailed it. You come in here and say, look, every restaurant's full, the shore's rocking. And again, it goes to the two Americas that Mike McKee was talking about.
Yeah, and again, even you think about this K-shaped economy. Obviously, not everyone's participating on equal terms, and inflation's hitting different people harder than some others, but by and large, the consumer is holding up here. The consumer's employed, by and large. Wages are rising. Inflation is down. So by and large, that gives you a backdrop, a pretty solid backdrop. And to me, I look at retail sales, but we'll get the inflation data today, Tom, the PCE.
We have the 10 o'clock hour. Is it with Alex Steele, or is she home frying the turkey?
She's frying the turkey.
She's frying the turkey at home
Yep,
today.
exactly right.
Do you have a designated replacement? Is Jess Benton coming in?
There might be Jess Benton.
It may be a Texas A&M Texas sighting.
Exactly. We're going to get a little preview of the Texas A&M Texas
Tucker
game.
Miller. Okay, I see.
Who is it coming in?
Matthew Miller.
Oh, that's trouble. That's trouble right there.
Yeah.
I did not okay that.
For PC. For the PC index at 10 o'clock, but right now, coming, let me go through the raft of data. I'm going to work backward here. I'm most interested at 10 o'clock in personal income, personal spending. We get all sorts of inventory and durable goods data, the cap goods, Boeing, ex-Boeing, I should say. Of course, I don't know what that means right now with Boeing in such turmoil. Wholesale inventories, Michael McKee pointing
he pulled
that out.
one. I don't know where that came from.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
If he says it's important, I'll go with it.
The core PCE price index here, we'll do that in 30 seconds. And the big one is the GDP redo. 2.8% is a statistic, the first look at September 30 ending GDP. We're going to see our moments from now where we are. And of course, out of this data, we frame up where are we on December at 31st in a year that's had ample GDP growth, and of course that top line nominal GDP as well. So we need to look at this economic data.
This is breaking news from Bloomberg.
And we've got a lot of it to get through. 14 items listed. That's just up until now. And then after that, we have 10 more lines of data. So let's start right now. We'll start with GDP annualized Q over Q. The survey was for 2.8%, came in right on target at 2.8%. As far as personal consumption, that expectation was for 3.7%, went down just a tick to 3.5%. We go to GDP price index. The expectation was for 1.8%, went up just a tick to 1.9%. Then core PCE price Price Index. All eyes there. The survey was for an increase of 2.2%, went down just a tick to 2.1%. A lot to get through. I want to also hit initial jobless claims for last week, 215,000. That was the survey. Came up just a bit lower at 213,000. The revised was revised up to 215,000. Okay, so the reaction on Wall Street, not much of a change. We have NASDAQ futures still down 0.1%, 32 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 54 points. S&P futures little changed, down about 1. The 2-year yield, 4.19%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.24%, and that's down about 6 basis points. Still waiting for a few revisions to come in. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, nice. Thank you so much for that as well. So market move here. I look at the 10-year real yield. It goes lower to a 1.96 handle, nowhere near the low yields of September, but there it is. Sweeney immediately goes to the 2-year yield in 6 basis points. Lower yields, 4.20%, nowhere near the emotion of 3.99, but we'll go to it. Bitcoin up 2,000. When was the last time I had Bitcoin in an economic data?
I don't know.
Data check. That's just
I hear a rumor that
irresponsible.
Matt Miller's going to be joining me at some point today so that we can have a full conversation there.
The VIX 14.10 right now. Our economic data, always our economic data, and it's brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about our consultative support and technology. We are thankful for the really key support of Commonwealth wrapped around Michael McKee and all of our economic data. I've been delaying here a little bit because Stuart Paul has the worst job at Bloomberg. He has to deal every day with Anna Wong.
Oh, boy.
It is painful. Joining us now, Stuart Paul, helping out with all of our U.S. economic data with Dr. Wong, who frankly is the most talked about economist in America. Stuart, let's look at this immediate economic data and then go to the broader vision of the Wong-Paul team. The data to me is sort of a mix, and I see that on the screen. What does the Federal Reserve take away from this data dump?
I think that given the fact that the employment mandate, the full employment mandate or maximum employment objective of the Fed is so front of mind right now, it's the rise in continuing claims that has to matter most. It's the most immediate and practical data point that we're getting in this 8:30 data drop. Of course, we would expect to see some moderation of initial claims given a little bit of the recovery from hurricane season. But the fact that it's taking workers so much longer to find new employment, especially new employment at higher wages, as we're seeing from some of the job openings data as well, I think that upward pressure that we're going to be seeing mounting on the unemployment rate is really what's going to be most front of mind for the Fed.
If you can't see this on Bloomberg Radio on YouTube, you can scope it in as Paul and I are scoping in. Stuart looks like he just came in from checking the maple trees for the maple syrup dump in November.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, what are we doing here?
I
He's
don't know.
there living the life.
It's seasonal. It's seasonal.
It's seasonal. He's very seasonal.
He's getting ready for ski season. He's, waxing the skis and, doing the edges and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Stuart, I mean, how do you think the Fed's going to view this set of data that we've seen today and what we're going to get later on this morning with the PCE?
The PCE, I actually think, is going to be a little bit hot. It's going to be a reason for the Fed to take a pause. We're expecting core PCE inflation month on month to register just a touch under 0.3%. Tom, I know you love that second digit of the forecast. So we're expecting 0.28 up from 0.27 on core PCE inflation. We also expect personal income increase 0.4% during the month of October, a little bit of an acceleration there. Now, this is what's a little bit tricky is that within core inflation, so much of it is being supported by the equity market rally and financial services prices. So reason to tighten up financial conditions just a touch to slow inflation.
30 seconds as you publish, Stuart Paul, with Dr. Wong, the American labor economy. What's a vector right now on the unemployment rate and non-farm payrolls?
The vector on the unemployment rate is pointing up. We're expecting an upward march just a little bit higher. Payrolls are slowing. And to take the words out of Fed Chairman Powell's mouth, you need to discount some of the NFP numbers that we've been seeing. Of course, we know that the numbers are going to be revised lower, and they are running below the pace that would be consistent with a steady unemployment rate. Expect the unemployment rate to exceed 4.5% over the next several months.
Stuart, thank you so much. Stuart Paul, Bloomberg Economics here, off the economic data. I was talking with their booking team, and I said, look, we got to get Bremmer in. Ian Bremer and Eurasia Group, of course, with their top 10 risks for 2025. They're putting that together right now. But really, we wanted to get an ample commercial-free conversation with Dr. Bremmer, and we do that this morning. It's our gift to you across this nation. Ian, I go back to your books, and I know you put one of your older books out on social media the other day of the tumult of 2024. What the news that we saw overnight of some solution north of Tel Aviv into Lebanon, can that be the first calming influence into 2025?
I think near term we are going to see some calming influences in the sense that Trump wants to end wars, and he's prepared to use a significant amount of U.S. political pressure and military pressure to get those outcomes. There's no question in my mind that a ceasefire with Hezbollah was related to the election. In part, it was delayed because the Israeli prime minister didn't want to give Biden-Harris a win. In part, it came quickly because they recognized that continuing to fight that war when Trump is in power is something that they were going to feel pressure over, and they wanted to avoid it. And next, of course, is going to be Russia-Ukraine. And I'm sure you're going to want to talk about that.
Oh, we have lots to talk about in this ample time, Ian. We really treasure it. How will shuttle diplomacy of Secretary Rubio be different than Secretary Blinken?
It'll be less frequent. Rubio's top priority from an experience perspective, and also in terms of the lane that he gets to occupy by himself, will be Latin America. It'll be Cuba. It'll be Venezuela. It'll be Mexico, more broadly, the region. I think he'll be credible there. And by the way, I think he'll probably also appoint bipartisan congressional delegations, Senate delegations, and send them to some of these countries and others, which is something that hadn't gone as quickly as I would have liked under Biden. But on the Middle East, we're following what has been the most pro-Israel government in the world, the Biden administration, with what will be an even more pro-Israel government under Trump, by far the most pro-Israel government in U.S. history. And that clearly is going to have an impact on Israeli settlements and annexation in the West Bank. It'll have an impact on the future of Gaza, and it will continue to put a hell of a lot of pressure on Iran. So I wouldn't look to Rubio to be the person that's going to lead that diplomatically, if simply because Trump's best relations in the world, and you'll remember, Tom, the first trip he took as president in 2017 was to Saudi Arabia and then to Israel, very unusually for a U.S. president. Wouldn't surprise me at all if the first trip he makes this time around is also to the Middle East.
So, Ian, does this ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah, does that bode well for potential ceasefire with Hamas? What are the relations, if any?
I don't think it matters much. I mean, it certainly puts Hamas under even more pressure, but it's hard to put Hamas under more pressure than they're already on. I mean, the Israeli prime minister said yesterday, well, now they know they're not going to get any support from Hezbollah. Support from Hezbollah hasn't stopped Hamas's tunnels from all getting blown up, their arms caches from getting blown up, their leaders from getting blown up, their fighters from getting blown up. I mean, frankly, the Israelis are running out of targets in Gaza at this point. So, I mean, the war has been winding down. The only reason it's not over is because there are still hostages that are being held by Hamas. And of course, we don't know how many of them are still left alive. But I mean, it's not like you have far fewer people getting killed in Gaza today than were 6 months ago, 9 months ago. And the reason for that is because it's just not that much more for Israel to hit. that is a productive Hamas target. So I think I don't think it does matter all that much. I think where the Hezbollah ceasefire matters is it's clearly welcome for Iran because it is a ceasefire that does not aim to end Hezbollah's capabilities. Israel is basically saying that they are not prepared to blow up every single Hezbollah member to end their military capabilities. And of course, this is Iran's top proxy in the world, and it's their principal deterrent against Israel. Well, Israel's prepared to allow them to continue to exist despite their military escalation dominance. So that's where I think it matters. Gaza, not so much.
I was speaking with Ian Bremer, president of Eurasia Group, getting a reset on global geopolitics, a lot happening in the Middle East and Ukraine. Ian, what is the position of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with his people, with Israel? Is he still as strongly entrenched as he appears to be?
He's much more strongly entrenched than he has been at any point in the last year. You'll remember before the October 7th terrorist attacks, there was a lot of Israel in the news because of massive demonstrations against Netanyahu's government for his efforts to get out from underneath his own legal problems and try to control what is a very independent judiciary. Then his popularity eroded even further because he was seen as responsible for allowing October 7th to happen on his watch. Well, it's a very different situation now. It is military successes against Hamas, political and military leaders, both assassinated under Netanyahu. It is Lebanon and Hezbollah, vastly more powerful than Hamas, being completely defanged by his war of choice in Lebanon. I mean, these are military victories. The ceasefire comes with success, political and military success by the Israelis. So I think that if there were an election in Israel today, obviously it would still be a coalition government because the political party system is so fragmented. But I think Netanyahu would have a relatively easy time in putting a coalition together.
Our Thanksgiving treat to you, Ian Bremer, with us for this entire half hour, commercial-free nationwide. Good morning on YouTube around the world. It's our new digital distribution. Dr. Bremmer, you came out of the housing projects in Chelsea, Massachusetts. You took a PhD at Stanford, I think in the vicinity of 24 years old. The dissertation, The Politics of Ethnicity, Russians in the Ukraine. I mean, talk about getting out front of the topic of the day. Ian, what drew you to the Russians in the Ukraine at the ripe old age of 24?
Well, I mean, the Soviet Union collapsing, suddenly 15 countries became independent, and there were lots of Russians in those countries. You'll remember back then, one of the people that we talked about the most, this was after Frank Fukuyama, end of history, it was Samuel Huntington, Clash of Civilizations. And what was a very popular theory was that what was going to replace the Cold War was going to be civilizational clash. And it was going to be Muslims versus Christians, not Muslims versus Muslims, Muslims versus Christians, all these civilizational clashes. And what I saw happening in the Soviet Union was that one of the places that seemed to be the most problematic and that was likely to cause the most long-term conflict was not Russians versus Muslim Kazakhs or Azeris or Uzbeks. It was Russians versus culturally identical Ukrainians. Similar language, similar religion, similar history, similar land. But you know, I was traveling in Crimea and I was meeting these Russians that are like, no, this is our land. This has nothing to do with Ukraine. And Southeast Ukraine, where it was heavily contested, and then places like Kiev and Lviv in the West. And I mean, these were European Ukrainians who felt European, who were closer to Poland, saying we want nothing to do, we want an independent country. Even though there was intermarriage at that point, even though a lot of people in Kiev didn't necessarily know, who was Ukrainian and who was Russian on the street. But around the country, people certainly did. So 30 years ago, it was very clear that this was
Right.
going to be a serious long-term problem. And of course, starting in 2014 and now again today, this turns out to be one of the kind of pivots
Let's get
for
out.
geopolitics.
Let's get out front, Ian. Your top 10 risks for 2025. We have some form of Chicago Tribune isolationist Middle America president-elect. He wants to get this fixed in Ukraine now. What in the zeitgeist right now are we getting wrong about Ukraine, given all your academic commitment to it? What's going to be the surprise in the next year?
Well, one is that the last time that President Trump ended a war, it was in Afghanistan. He gave away the store to the Taliban, but he didn't have to do the cleanup. That was for Biden. This time around, the deal that is cut by Trump, he's going to be responsible for 4 years. And so I think he's aware of that. And I wonder, yes, he really wants to end the war. He's got a lot of capacity to pressure the Ukrainians. But the presumption in the media and the zeitgeist, as you say, is that Trump is going to give away the store to Putin. And I don't think that's true. I don't think he wants a situation where Ukraine can be completely run over and undermined by Russia. I think he's going to want a Ukraine that the war is over. Russia's still in the occupied territory they have now. There's no way to get them out of it. But Ukraine has the ability to defend themselves and prevent Russia from taking more territory. So that's not an easy deal to get done with Putin. And I think if there's a place where Trump is going to be more flexible than the Europeans want, certainly, I think it's going to be on the economic side. I think Putin really would like to see an end to sanctions. And I think Trump is prepared to give that to him. It'll be very interesting to see how the Europeans respond to that. And do they respond to it in a unified way, or do they break down? That to me is where people are getting it wrong, in my view.
Ian, what's the role of Zelensky and the Ukrainian people in this whole process, assuming President-elect Trump wants to push a peace movement forward?
Look, they recognize that they need to end this war. They're losing much more territory in the last week than they've lost in any week since the beginning of the war. And I expect that to continue. The Russians are going to press this for the next couple of months until Trump becomes president. And the Ukrainian position is likely to look a lot worse when inauguration hits than it does right now. So, I mean, yeah, you've got the permissioning to use long-range missiles. That doesn't help them strategically on the ground, particularly. That's why Biden dragged his feet on it to begin with, because it wasn't going to matter very much. So, look, Zelensky, frankly, needs an excuse to stop the bleeding. And it is, ending the war is more popular now in Ukraine than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. But he can't be seen as losing his country. So again, a lot of this has to do with what Trump and his team is going to come in and say. And, you know, the Trump Advisory Group, the cabinet coming in, let's leave aside Tulsi Gabbard, who is an outlier, but wouldn't be seen in this position as driving the outcomes, you know, is going to be pretty hawkish in support of Ukraine. So I think there's still a great deal to watch here. I don't think it's I don't think this is giving away the store and undermining Zelensky completely.
Ian Bremer with us. Just thrilled to have him on here for almost a whole half hour. We're commercial free through the economic data, churn to the market. The Sweeney yield 4.21%, the 2-year yield in 5 basis points. I look at the 10-year real yield, that's in 5 basis points, 1.97%. I want to go back to a book, Ian, that you featured the other day, Us Versus Them, The Failure of Globalism. You steal a line from Raghuраjan out at Booth. You go, the fault lines is chapter 3 of Us Versus Them. Where's the fault line right now in our trade policy forward? Lighthizer not on board, but I guess we have a new trade policy. Witnessed the news the other day. Where is the unknown fault line we need to pay attention to?
Well, there are two, as you note from Trump's first efforts at making policy as president-elect. You've got the ally fault line where he expects, deals, and then you've got the adversary fault line where he expects deals. And Trump doesn't necessarily treat them as all that different. I mean, it was less than an hour between him posting that there's going to be new tariffs against Mexico and Canada unless they give him satisfaction, and when he said the same thing about China, unless the Chinese provide satisfaction. So those are, Tom, those are two very, very different fault lines.
Yeah, but to me, Paul, this is really important. Dr. Bremmer, to me, what's so simplistic here, China, us versus them, Canada, us versus them. Goldman Sachs, I believe it was, and thank you, Zero Hedge, had a brilliant note out on what about Vietnam? I mean, Ian, are we amateur and naive that we don't understand how complex this debate is?
Are we, or is Trump?
I think all of us within our discussion is just so easy to be transactional and to be bipartisan, where it's still a multilateral world. Am I wrong?
I think it's important to react to the policymakers that are driving policy. And Trump is already occupying that role. And he chose to go after Canada, Mexico, and China. And he does not see tariffs through a uniquely economic lens. He sees tariffs as the principal tool by which the United States gets outcomes that it wants in foreign policy. I mean, in his first administration, it is true that he used tariffs to try to make America great again in places like steel, right? And he also used it to try to get the Japanese and South Koreans to pay more for their defense vis-a-vis the United States. He used it in Mexico to talk about immigration. In his post the other day, he was talking about fentanyl, and it wouldn't surprise me if those posts came right on the back of Trump watching some Fox News segment showing how horrible fentanyl is in the United States. And he's like, I got to do something about that. I'm going to go and hit the Mexicans and the Canadians and the Chinese. So it's not as if Trump is using tariffs purely to redress economic problems, although clearly he does care about trade deficits. It's far, far broader than that.
Right.
Yeah. Get one more in here, Paul.
Ian, we're starting to see this cabinet kind of shake out here. From your perspective, the way you view the world, is there anything that kind of jumps out at you, either positive or negative?
Getz jumped out at me as uniquely negative. There were a solid 7 hard no's among Republican senators to get him out. And what I thought was interesting was that Trump allowed him to be thrown under the bus immediately, didn't put up a fight. It's the amazing thing about Trump is that when he decides that he's no longer interested, it's gone. It's gone. He doesn't dwell on losses. He you'll never hear about it again, right? I thought it was also interesting, something that didn't happen. Howard Lutnick, who Elon Musk was pushing internally, and there were leaks against that from Trump's advisors, and then he pushed publicly, and within 48 hours, Lutnick didn't get Treasury. So that was interesting, right? I mean, this is, in other words, and I haven't seen J.D. Vance have much influence at all in terms of appointees. Yeah. So Trump is making these decisions. The Getz decision was made initially without Trump's chief of staff even knowing about it, Susie Wiles. So, I mean, this isn't maybe what you were asking, but I mean, I'm pointing to a whole bunch of things that didn't happen where I think we're getting information. Certainly, there are still outliers in terms of people that really they shouldn't be in the positions that they're in. Right. Telsey's one. I mean, Dr. Oz, for Christ's sake. RFK Jr., Pete Hegseth, but these are not authoritarians, and frankly, these are not people who I see as strategically or even structurally corrupt. They're just people that are fundamentally incompetent and unfit for the jobs, and there aren't that many of them. Most of the people that he's appointing are people that I would consider to be at least marginally capable, and some of them, like Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio, are strongly capable.
Right.
So, it's at least a B- for cabinet so far.
I need an A+, Ian. I need you to do the 20 top risks for 2025. Get to work. There seem to be some top risks out there. Ian Bremer with us. What a great way to start the holiday season. Dr. Bremer, of course, at Eurasia Group. Can't say enough about his books. One out a couple years ago. We got to look for the next book to come out as Well, I just think, Paul, you think we should knock on the door at the Mateo house, 2 p.m.?
Yeah. Hey, we're here.
The yelling and screaming starts. The kids are just barely out of bed.
Yep.
You need the dishwasher clean, and they're like, no. There's only one song that touches on the heart and soul of the Mateo house this Thanksgiving.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
Have we achieved the soft landing? Has the Fed kind of done its job?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Fears over a broader regional war in the Middle East.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr on assignment. Lions tomorrow. We'll dive into that in this hour. Lisa Mateo with us as well. We say good morning on your commute across the nation for the 12 of you working. Good morning on your travels across the nation on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Sirius XM. Good morning, sitting on. What are you going to do when you get home today? I mean, do you put the beast? Do you have like a 26-pound beast?
No, we're going to go a little bit cash here, but we're down the shore. It's going to be a nice rainy day tomorrow. It's been spectacular.
We need the rain.
The whole fall, we need the rain, so we're going to get some tomorrow. That's okay. But the folks at the parade are going to get a little wet, so they need to wear their ponchos.
I've been watching here, Flight Aware. Hold on, let me get it up here.
It's not too bad right now, but I think it could get a little dicey.
Yeah, there it is, right there.
But who flies during this time of year?
Just
asking for problems.
Like worldwide. It's gone up. Okay, I stand corrected. We had 90 delays. Now we have 145 delays as we wake up across America. We have only 4 cancellations. I'd say all
we're hanging in there today.
What a shock. Newark's the worst. I'm absolutely stunned
Air traffic controllers probably they have a little bit of problem. They don't have enough of them. So I don't know how that happens.
Do you know anything about like what they actually? Isn't it like really stressful?
I think it looks really stressful. It sounds stressful. I listen to the air traffic controllers, and I don't know how they do it. I don't know what they're saying half the time, but it sounds stressful.
My worst is you go into Heathrow, and you go like around London, and you go over the end of the Thames, and you turn around, and you're going west into Heathrow. and there's like 6 or 7 planes going north-south, like the high-speed road to Edinburgh.
Yep.
I'm looking around going, who's keeping track
Who's in charge of
of
this?
all these planes? Like Teterboro and Middle. I mean, the
Yeah.
Gulfstream, we go to Middletown.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You know, I don't know who has it this weekend.
No, I'm not
Maybe
sure.
Farrell.
I do not know. I'm not sure.
That's Farrell's going to Qatar.
There you go.
For
Okay.
the F1 race.
Very
That's
good.
what it is this weekend. We say good morning to all of you. We're going to get through this because we're getting to 10 o'clock with economic data further. Matthew Miller starring at 10 a.m. with Paul Sweeney. And I'm sorry, there's more personal income, personal spending, this inflation data, pending home sales.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, we'll have to see. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Yeah, we've got futures mix, and you said it after a big economic data dump. Let's get to some of it. So U.S. GDP grew at a solid 2.8% pace in the third quarter, and that was really thanks to an advance in consumer spending, which rose 3.5%. Core PCE index rose 2.1%. The expectation was for a rise of 2.2%. Jobless claims, let's not forget about that, fell 2,000 to 213,000 last week. The expectation was just a bit higher at about 215,000. Durable goods orders came in lower than expected. Wholesale inventories a bit higher than forecast. All that said, we have NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 50 points. S&P futures little change, down 3. Dow futures up 0.1%, 58 points. We have the 2-year yield 4.21%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.25%, and that's down 5 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.5%. We have the Japanese yen up about 1%. Euro, British pound stronger. And we have the revival of the PC computer market really taking a hit. Dell Technologies, it reported worse than expected sales. Its shares down 12%. Meanwhile, you have HP. They said an increase in component costs. That was the main reason why its profit outlook in the current quarter fell short of estimates. Its shares down 7%. And finally, Workday falling down 11% this morning after it issued a disappointing forecast. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Bears, Lions, classic football.
Yep.
Bears sort of an off year. They need Mike Ditka. 4-7. Lions 10-1.
Unbelievable. I can't remember. I literally can't remember the last time they were that good.
They played 84 times on Thanksgiving Day every year since 1945.
That's the way to do it.
I don't understand why. We'll have to talk to Michael Barr about that.
It's a great Midwest.
Scheduled to be. We should say thank you to Michael Barr. He's been, the Detroit Lions and, the defensive line. He's out there helping out. And maybe he's back next week. We'll have to see on that as well. Red and green on the screen right now. We've ignored fixed income the last 2 days, waiting for Ira Jersey. He joins us now, our chief U.S. interest rate strategist as well. Ira, which tea leaf in your universe is the one you're watching right now? On the Ira Jersey Bloomberg Launchpad, which is the data point you'll monitor 24/7?
Well, it's hard to monitor some monthly data 24/7, but today's PCE report certainly is going to be a big focus. We just received updated data for the third quarter, which showed that the Fed's preferred measure of inflation, the core PCE deflator, was pretty close to their target, right? 2.1% on a quarter-on-quarter basis in the third quarter. So the October data that we get in just about less than an hour now, unusually, because it usually comes out at the end of the month, but with the holiday they moved it up to 10 a.m. today, is the core PCE deflator, and that's going to be the key focus. If that comes in at 0.2%, which is I think the expectation, then I think it's going to be a good for the Fed, and the Fed can say, okay, look, job accomplished. Maybe we don't have to cut as aggressively as we originally thought, and that'll be a key data point until we get the payrolls report next Friday, which will trump everything. No pun intended.
Is the Fed still, I guess, focused on and committed to a Fed's funds rate significantly lower than where we are here, or could they pause for a while?
Yeah, so I don't know if they're necessarily paused for a while, but certainly I think there is this scope for the Fed at this point to go slower. When we received some of the incoming data about a month ago, our view was here at the Bloomberg Intelligence Rate Strategy was that the Fed didn't have to go as aggressively as they had said in the September Summary of Economic Projections when they put out the dot plot. That they have the chance now to skip the December meeting to basically say and prove what what Jay Powell's been saying, is that we're not on a preset path. We don't necessarily have to go at every meeting. Well, this is assuming that the jobs data is okay next week. Then they can prove that. Now, does that mean that they'll then cut in January? Once again, I don't know if they necessarily need to pause then. That will be determined by the incoming data. Do we have a decent retail sales for the holiday period, right? There'll be a lot of information that we receive before that January meeting. But, just given the preponderance of data, I suspect that the odds are that the Fed will actually skip cutting in December and wait for the January meeting to make another decision.
I was talking to Bramowitz, and I was talking to her about the auction market. You know what she's doing tomorrow? She's having a kale salad.
I'm sure
for Thanksgiving.
she is.
I mean, it's just so Bramo. Okay, Lisa, do you have a kale salad for Thanksgiving?
That sounds amazing.
Oh, please.
Terrible.
Yes.
Here's another
Kale
thing.
salad?
Kale did not exist before 5 years ago. I never once heard about it. It goes into the area of tilapia.
It's like seaweed.
It's never entered.
My kids grew up on dried kale like the last decade or so.
There you go. And they're such happy children.
They're such it's a miracle as well. To go to Bramo, Ira Jersey, I never talk about the auctions because I don't care. Bramo lives the auctions. Tell us about what you observe about confidence in American fixed income when you observe the auctions.
Well, so in general, the Treasury auctions, even though they're still of relatively large size and we're creating a lot of new government debt, they've actually gone reasonably well this month. And I think that surprised some people because, this idea that, hey, we're still going to have, even under a Trump administration, likely to have, $1.5 to $2 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see. There's still very strong demand for Treasury securities. And you continue to see that in the fact that people are even bidding away from the primary dealers. So, there's two ways that non-dealers can get bonds, and one is they go through a primary dealer or a third party in order to order those bonds, or they can go directly to the Federal Reserve and buy them from the Treasury Department. So we don't necessarily know who those investors are, and that actually picked up massively the last couple of auctions. We do have a 7-year auction today, so unusually it's at 11:30 this morning. So that way, I guess all the fixed income guys can go home at noon today.
Are you kidding me? There's an auction today?
So, an auction today, 7-year auction at $44 billion at 11:30. So, we get data at 10:30. We get data at 10. We then get the auction at 11:30. 12 o'clock or so. Probably trading desks will start to clear out.
Jeez,
Probably.
that's how they roll. That's how they
Probably.
roll. That's when I clear out at 12 noon. But so, hey, I got 2s and 10s at my U.S. Treasuries. They're kind of comparable again, 4.2, 4.25%. What happened there? What's going on there?
Yeah, so we had steepened quite a lot, right? We went from 100 basis points inverted to about 25 basis points steep. So a huge move over the course of a year in the 2s 10s curve. But the market is trying to adjust now to expectations of, hey, where is the Fed going to be over the next 3, 5, 10 years even? Right. And what the market's saying with the curve being flat is that it doesn't expect interest rates to move very much from here on average over the next decade. So, we're trying to find a new equilibrium in interest rates for the long term.
And now across America, folks, 30 seconds of soccer talk. Chelsea, Aston Villa, come on, help me out here. What does Aston Villa need to do to get back on track?
Yeah, we really have not had a good month at all.
Yes.
But today we play Juventus in the Champions League later today. So, hopefully we can, eke out, even if we eke out a draw there, that's great for us in the Champions League. But we do have to get back in the Premier League. And this is, I mentioned this to you, I think a month or two ago. My fear about Aston Villa the whole time has been the depth of our squad. We're just, we don't have 16, 18 world-class players. We have 13, right? And this is the problem with playing in so many competitions and not having a deep squad.
Well, they're the New York Giants of the Premier League. Thank you so much, Air Jersey. Greatly appreciate that this morning. Quickly now with our news in New York City, here's John Tucker.
All right, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The weather, traffic, and other factors could hamper efforts to get to your Thanksgiving destination. Millions expected to fly and hit the roads. All comes as the TSA expects to screen more than 2.9 million travelers today. Elisa Farbstein is a TSA spokesperson.
In the 23 years TSA has been in existence, the top 10 busiest days in our history have all happened this year, all since Memorial Day weekend. And then on July 7th, we broke 3 million for the first time. So we screened 3 million people for the very first time, July 7th. It is possible that we might do that just again on Sunday.
But it's not the weather that's been causing problems so far. It's a lack of staffing. Last night, flights at Newark Airport in New Jersey were delayed after the FAA issued a ground delay because of an air traffic controller shortage. President-elect Trump continuing to fill out his new administration, naming Kevin Hassett to lead the National Economic Council. Hassett, a major supporter of tax cuts. Trump also tapping Jamieson Greer as U.S. Trade Representative. More on that from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
The selection of Greer highlights the central role tariffs will play in Trump's economic agenda. He's a longtime protege of Robert Lighthizer, and he was involved in Trump's first-term trade policy decisions, including steep duties on China and the negotiations for a partial trade deal with Beijing concluded shortly before the outbreak of the pandemic. Greer is now expected to play a pivotal role in implementing the president-elect's tariff plans, including 25% levies on Canadian and Mexican goods, as well as an additional 10% on existing Chinese tariffs. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
Australia's House of Representatives today passed a bill that would ban kids younger than 16 from social media. The major parties backed the bill. Would make platforms including TikTok and X liable for fines of up to $33 million for failures to prevent kids from holding accounts. Global news 24 hours a day, whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
John Tucker, thanks so much. VIX, there it is, Paul, 13.99.
There you go. Yep. Boom.
I mean, wow. They're red and green on the screen, but the VIX under 14. Stay with us. An important interview for America coming up next. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash is brought to you by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, we have futures still mixed, and this is after more economic data came piling in. Right now, we want to start with NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 45 points. Dow futures, little change, up about 40. We have S&P futures, little change, down about 4. We have the two-year yield at 4.21%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%, and that's down 5 basis points. We have Brent crude up about 0.1%, $72 a barrel. WTI crude, $68 a barrel. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.5%. We have the Japanese yen up more than 1%, and Bitcoin right now up about 94,000. Shares of cybersecurity company CrowdStrike Holdings are down 0.5%. That was after a disappointing earnings forecast. And then you have shares of clothing accessories brand Guess lower, down 7%. Reported third quarter revenue that missed estimates. And then you have clothing retailer Urban Outfitters faring a little bit better this morning. Their shares on the rise, up 13%. It reported stronger than expected sales growth in that third quarter. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. On this Wednesday before Thanksgiving across America, and we welcome all of you on YouTube as well. Our new distribution, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out at YouTube. He shows up from Kase Capital Management. I guess we should talk to Whitney Tilson about private equity, private this, that, investment, global macro, except he's changed the script. Whitney Tilson is decided to run for mayor. As John Tucker just mentioned, it is a crowded field as well. He will run as a Democrat in this New York City. Whitney, you've climbed the Matterhorn. It's not K2, the East Face, but you're Mr. Mountain Climber. I've looked from Zermatt over at the Matterhorn and going, you got to be kidding me. This mayor's race is going to be tougher than the Matterhorn, tougher than anything you've climbed. How are you going to find a distinctive voice on the worry of crime in New York City and, quite frankly, across this nation?
Speaking more broadly just about a distinctive voice, not just on crime, but there is no business person in the field. In fact, you said it's a crowded field, and I don't know, I guess a half dozen people sounds crowded, but I'm the only person who's not a career politician in the field. So I'm a lifelong Democrat, been super active in the party for the last 20 years, but ever since Mayor Bloomberg left, look at what's happened to our city in the last 11 years. With some combination of career politicians, de Blasio and Adams, the last two mayors, who are some combination of corrupt, incompetent, and beholden to the radical left. And so I'm concerned about my city. I share the view of the majority of New Yorkers that the city's heading in the wrong direction. I want to turn it around. I
should mention that former Mayor Bloomberg, of course, is part of Bloomberg LP and drives a ship every morning for Bloomberg Surveillance and Bloomberg Radio worldwide. Whitney Tilson, Mr. Bloomberg had ample funds to prosecute a campaign. What is the initial support you've seen if you don't have the Bloomberg checking account?
Right. Well, every candidate has to decide whether to take city matching money or self-fund. Mayor Bloomberg spent $73 million of his own money to win his first race for mayor and then served 2 more terms, of course. I, like every other candidate in the race, is going to take advantage of an extraordinary matching program, but we have to adhere to a $7.9 million total spend for the primary and the same for the general, whoever wins the primary. $7.9 million, and by the way, if we adhere to that, all candidates, if we take up to $250 from New York City residents, it's matched 8-to-1. So any New York City resident who gives me $250, my campaign gets $2,000 on top of that. And so I plan to take full advantage of that and try and raise as much money from New York City residents.
And what's great about that, Paul Sweeney, is John Tucker's congestion tax payment each day will be $250 the way he's crossing across 60th Street.
All right, Whitney, let's go to that. What's your view on congestion pricing? Because that's become a political football.
I know. I'm all in favor of it. I think we should be doing the opposite of what this country has been doing for the last 50 years, which is subsidizing driving and charging for public transportation. We should be doing the reverse. I've traveled the world and I've been to Singapore, and there is not a single bit of traffic, any kind of traffic jam in Singapore. Why? Because they congestion price basically the whole city, and anytime there's rush hour traffic on a particular street, they just raise the price until the traffic is gone. I think people who oppose congestion pricing are thinking about the cost of it wrong. It's not the $9 or the $15 that's really costing people. It's sitting in traffic for an hour, burning expensive gas and wasting your time. And I want to get rid of all of that in New York City.
All right, let's talk about housing costs. I mean, for most New Yorkers, it is a constant challenge. Quite frankly, it's been a constant challenge as long as I can remember. Is there a solution? Is there a way to reduce that burden on average New Yorkers?
Yes, although there's no magic bullet that's going to immediately bring down housing costs. This is built up over a long period of time, and it's a classic example of what I, as a lifelong Democrat, am running against, which is I'm a sensible centrist. We need to build more housing. Vacancy rate in New York City is down to 1.4%. And the problem is nobody's been able to build new housing because of primarily bureaucratic regulations and so forth, but also these incredibly onerous zoning rules. The radical lefty NIMBY types, not in my backyard types, have taken a good idea, which is sensible zoning, and taken it to an extreme when you have sort of a one-party control of the city. Often extremists get their agenda, and over the years, all these zoning regs have built up. So to its credit, the city council last week finally passed a watered-down bill to slightly ease these zoning issues, I'm going to really push hard on that because we need a lot more housing, and that will bring the price down.
Whitney Tilson, our listeners and viewers nationwide, indeed worldwide, when they go through JFK, visit New York and they notice a different and absolutely unique police force. Jessica Tisch takes over as the new commissioner for Mayor Adams. What will the Tilson NYPD look like if you're elected as a Democratic mayor?
Yeah, well, I can boil it down into six words. Big picture. Let police do their frickin' jobs. That's the big picture. And 3 words that is the opposite, which is defund the police, which are the 3 dumbest words of all time. So again, that's what the radical left has been pushing and handcuffing our police. So let me give 3 bullet points. Number 1, crime, violent crime in particular, is not random. If you look at all the 100,000 plus city blocks in New York, 50% of violent crime occurs in only 3.5% of those blocks. Often it's a single apartment building or a single block where there's open air drug dealing, like in Washington Square Park, for example. In those areas, the police working with the local community. You can't have the police come in as some invading force, oppressing the local residents. It's the law-abiding local residents in these areas that are being terrorized by criminals. That so you flood the zone, you declare a state of emergency, and you put more police in, not less, working with the community. Okay. So that would be number 1. Number 2 is we've got to roll back part of the sanctuary city legislation that the radical left passed under de Blasio that don't allow our local officials, when they arrest an illegal immigrant committing crimes, they should be turned over to ICE and on the next flight back to their home country, and that's not happening.
Okay, Whitney, we've got to leave it there. We're out of time, but we look forward to having you back on again, as we will many other candidates within this New York City mayoral race, including perhaps we'll try to get on again Eric Adams, our present mayor. Mr. Tilson running as a Democrat in a crowded field, to say the least. It's a crowded field here, 5 minutes to the market opening on this special Wednesday, even more special at 10 a.m. The Matthew Miller Show.
Well, he's going to come in at, apparently now, we're going to get at 11 to 12. We get a special Matt Miller viewing. He's going to be here from 11 to 12.
So this is Jessica Menton's People That a Tantrum?
John Tucker from 10 to 11. That's
really,
how I understand it right now.
It's too much excellence.
There's a lot going on here behind the scenes.
I can't keep track. Your people are talking to Tucker's people?
Exactly.
Very good. Okay, well, we'll see. We're moving forward. Good morning. This is Bloomberg Radio Nationwide.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In this opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with the new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETF insights to learn more. All right, investors certainly have their hands full of data to go through this morning. U.S. GDP grows at a solid 2.8% pace in the third quarter, and that was thanks to an advance in consumer spending, which rose 3.5%. Let's not forget jobless claims fell 2,000 to 213,000 last week. We're off and running. Let's start with the S&P 500. 500 down 0.1%, 7 points, 6,014. The Dow, little changed, up 28 points at 44,894. The Nasdaq down 0.2%, 46 points at 19,128. The 2-year yield 4.20%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.24%, and that's down 6 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.5%. The Japanese yen up 1% at 151.06 against the dollar. The euro and British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin up about 3% now at around 94,000. At the open, we're also checking with shares of Dell and HP. Dell down 11%, HPQ down about 4%. That is your opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Tried to slide into the Fontainebleau, in Miami.
That's not happening.
It's not happening. No. I mean, Miami's booming. You can't get a hotel room.
But we know a guy down there.
You go down there and you change your look. I mean, you get a look in New York City, and then you go to Miami, and it's a different look.
Yeah.
You got to work it. Why don't you bring in Mr. McGlone? You guys talk all. He doesn't get up before 10 a.m.
No, it's a little different down there in Miami. Mike's our pioneer Bloomberg Intelligence analyst down in the Miami Beach market. Mike McGlone, senior macro strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence from our Miami office here. I'm looking at gold here, Mike. I mean, we had a little bit of a pullback in gold, but now we're moving higher yet again. What are you hearing from folks in the gold market these days?
Well, good morning. I think the first key thing that I think about gold are two things. That bond yield, the 10-year note yield in China is 2.05%, and the 10-year note yield in U.S. is 4.25%. And they're both heading lower. So gold's had a decent move. It got up to around 2,800. It's correcting a little bit on the definitive election, and now it's going back to what it's been doing for decades, and certainly for this year, and so advancing. So I think gold's going to continue. It's just a matter of time. It gets to $3,000 an ounce. Question is, does it test 2,400 first? And the key thing that really will get gold going, I think, more is if and when we finally get at some point a 10% correction in the S&P 500. We haven't had that since Q4 of last year.
Who's buying this stuff? I've heard the central bank. I've heard Chinese consumers. Who's buying this stuff?
The deepest pockets on the planet. It's been our key focus for a couple of years. It's central bank's key buyer. China's a top buyer. And one significant place where there hasn't been buying is ETFs, investors. Now, they've been up recently, but on a beginning of a year basis, total ETF holdings in terms of ounces are down about 3%, and gold's up about 30%. So at some point when that flips, and I didn't say if, but when that flips, when U.S. investors say, yeah, maybe I need a little protection in the stock market, that's, I think, what gets gold going. I think a key risk for gold is some kind of significant détente. Geopolitics, maybe if China tilts away from Russia and becomes a friend with the U.S., but that seems less likely.
I look, Mike McGlone, at the McGlone rally in Bitcoin. That's what it's called in the textbooks as well. And the big theme, Mike McGlone, of those in shock, including the new CEO at Charles Schwab said he wished he was on board, is there's no underlying. For Mike McGlone at 93,000, what is the underlying of Bitcoin? What is the value add and growthiness forward?
It's one of your favorites, I think, Tom. More buyers. ETF flows have been significant this month alone, around $6 billion. Total ETF buying this year has been closer to 30. Total ETF holdings in Bitcoin now are over about 120 billion. To put that in comparison, there's been ETFs tracking gold for 20 years, and it's about 220 billion. So more buyers, but I agree with the premise is it's still a very speculative digital asset. And now we have the mainstream on board. I'm very concerned that the market might have put in a pretty good peak. And there was one of my favorites, Tom, was a double dog there that you would love. Is Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy pointed out that Mr. Buffett might be not be a good investor by putting his, having a high amount of cash and not in Bitcoin, which is kind of a double dog there that you never do the market gods. I think that's Bitcoin's put in a pretty good peak around 10,000 for a while.
In 2021, Eric Balchunas enjoyed a 72% decline in BitDog. That over, I'm going to say, 18 months. It's different now because Gensler and all let the ETFs in. Mike McGlone, if Bitcoin begins an historic kind of 94 to 80, I'll let you decide, 94 to 70, how do you think the ETF retail behavior will be that wasn't there in 2021?
Well, there you go. I think that's the key thing. I think it's Tom, that really matters is they've bought into this hopium. We do have this major shift, paradigm shift, where our former president, now new president, has been kind of more of a convert. He's now a bit of a zealot for cryptos. So that's very positive. But now there's just so much speculative excess of the frenzy, and everybody thinks it's going to go up. And I think the key test is when we finally get a bit of backup in beta, can Bitcoin trade more like a risk off and gold and treasury bonds, or is it more likely just a risk on? I think the risk is that when beta does back up, Bitcoin's going to do what it normally does. It trades at basically 3 times the volatility of the stock market and 3 times the volatility of gold. And I think it's more likely to go down when that happens. We just have to see that test. And we haven't seen it yet. We've seen one test this year. S&P 500 corrected about 8%, and at that time was the bottom into August. Bitcoin dropped about 25%.
Interesting. My Alex Steele question of the day, since she's not in today: WTI crude oil sitting right at $69 an ounce. It feels like it's kind of found a home here. What's driving global crude prices these days, Mike?
Increasing supply, decreasing demand, and that's all agreed on by all the rating agencies now, OPEC, IEA, EIA. It's just a classic example of a market that's elastic to prices, and prices peaked a lot in 2022. Now they're coming down, and I think the bottom line is you got to get to around $56 a barrel or below. That's the U.S. break-even cost until you see that supply curtail and demand pick up. And the key risk is if we just get a little back up in the U.S. stock market, that'll pressure all commodities. And the number one really one that matters is probably copper. Copper needs to go up.
All right. I think I'm going to go climb into the pits, Mike, and short coffee here. It's the highest since 1977. What the heck's going on with coffee?
Well, I'd love to be able to structure an option position for you. You'd be able to do that. So coffee is just like cocoa, and they're very much centered, the grow where they're produced are on the equator. So they're very much at the epicenter of global climate change and warming. So we're having a drought in Brazil. It's mostly boosting coffee, but you see that price around $3 a pound. It's been marked peak since the 70s when some of us first started drinking coffee, and typically it's resolved around $1. And it's an autocorrelated commodity, just like cocoa. So I don't expect it to stay up these levels for too long, but it can be irrational for a while.
Mike McGlone, have we reached peak Miami? I mean, it's getting hotter. A lot of people living in Florida say Cameron says it's getting hotter. I mean, have we reached peak Miami where, actually you can buy a house in Coral Gables?
No, well, see, my wife and I have actually looked, and we gave up on that. They're a little too expensive. But the bottom line for Miami, Tom, we're overdue for some bumps in the road. But the bottom line is the tax. There ain't none on a Florida state tax basis. That's shocking for people who are Wall Street types. And the flow is quite overwhelming for now. And I really hear that a lot from is Bloomberg sales. A lot of sales are coming down there. A lot of traders are coming down there. They're due for a bump in the road. And it's probably going to be leading beta. So, Miami goes up a lot more in beta, and then it goes down a lot more. And we are seeing a lot of signs of bumps in the road lately. Condo prices are starting to come down.
There you go. That's your local report. But Mike was early, Tom.
I think we need a road trip.
Well, of course we do. I'll make a phone call.
On the porch there at the Betsy in South Beach, surveillance, 7 a.m. John, Absolutely. Are you okay? Lisa, does Tucker need medication because he's realized there's no taxes in Florida? You okay over there, John?
Well, I'm sure their schools are excellent and all those other
things. Oh, they are?
The taxes.
Yeah, it's improving, I'm told. They're diving into it.
Very good.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Michael McClone, thank you so much, and congratulations on an all-time call. BitDog was like 27,000, and McClone's laughing at me.
Is Miami instituting the congestion pricing?
I think so. I wouldn't be surprised. Seriously, I looked at hotels down there. Are you kidding me?
No, it's hotter than it's ever been.
It's just brutal.
Yeah, I know.
It's like McGlone. Is he the smartest guy we know?
He is, absolutely.
How did that happen?
He came in for his interview, and I think he was about 5 minutes into his pitch, and we all looked at each other and says, "When can you start?"
Yeah,
I mean, literally, that's how good he was.
I mean, it's operative thing. Michael McGlone there on commodities, and you heard him mention copper as well. Red and green in a scree. We have important economic data coming up in 20 minutes with our news in New York City. John Tucker.
All right, let's start with this. President-elect Trump continuing to fill out his new administration. He's tapped Jamison Greer as U.S. Trade Representative. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Gina Cervetti.
The selection of Greer highlights the central role tariffs will play in Trump's economic agenda. He's a longtime protege of Robert Lighthizer, and he was involved in Trump's first-term trade policy decisions, including steep duties on China and the negotiations for a partial trade deal with Beijing, concluded shortly before the outbreak of the pandemic. Greer is now expected to play a pivotal role in implementing the president-elect's tariffs plans, including 25% levies on Canadian and Mexican goods, as well as an additional 10% on existing Chinese tariffs. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
And Donald Trump putting a familiar name in charge of his National Economic Council. Kevin Hassett chaired the White House Council of Economic Advisors in the first Trump administration. In a statement, Trump says Hassett's going to keep help families recover from inflation and renew and improve his tax cuts. A ceasefire underway in the Middle East. Israel and Hezbollah have entered into a temporary truce in Lebanon after weeks of U.S.-mediated talks. And Bloomberg's Jemana Versace has more from Dubai.
It is temporary in nature. It's going to be only 60 days long. And the terms stipulate that Israeli troops have to gradually withdraw from the southern border of Lebanon. This is a gradual phasing out of troops, it should be stated. In addition to that, Hezbollah also are required to retreat 30 kilometers away from that so-called blue line demarcation as well.
That's Jemana Versace reporting negotiations will now begin for a more permanent truce. Israel's defense minister has instructed the military to act firmly and without compromise if Hezbollah violates that deal. The Vatican and Microsoft unveiling a digital twin of St. Peter's Basilica. It uses AI to explore one of the world's most important monuments while helping the Holy See manage visitor flows and identify conservation problems. Oh, and here's a new way to shop. Savvy shoppers are using AI tools like ChatGPT to find the best deals on Black Friday. You're nodding. Did you do this, or you?
I will do it.
Okay.
Now,
So
instead of
now
waiting
you don't
online.
have to camp out at the stores.
No,
in
you
the
do that
parking lot?
instead. You do the ChatGPT, then you go online. You ask ChatGPT where the best online deals are.
Have you done that already?
No.
Does it work?
She's going to be all over this.
Okay. 44% of likely Black Friday shoppers plan to use AI this year, according to a survey of Lisa. And we check global news 24 hours a day whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. Lisa.
We go to Paul Sweeney here, and as he has said repeatedly, finally a recovery in Hollywood off the strike and all. It's a big weekend, and are we beyond Barbie and Oppenheimer?
Yeah, I mean the Wicked
It's
and
like
Gladiator
working.
too are good, solid holiday movies. Hollywood, Tom, it's 2025. Every studio's telling you that 2025 calendar year is going to be the big year, and it's primarily just some random timing, but also because of the Hollywood's writer's strike, a lot of projects got pushed back, so it's going to be condensed into 2025.
Gura had to tell his youngest last night, you
Yep.
can't go to that fancy school because they're going to see Moana 2.
Right, exactly.
And the answer is, are we going back to the movie theater? Other than like
We're not back.
blockbusters?
We're not. I was looking at some of the data from Bloomberg Intelligence, Geetha Ranganathan. We're not back to 99.
We're not back to
2019 levels.
yeah.
We're not there. We're still about 1 million viewers or customers below that, but coming back slowly.
Lisa, Moana 2 this weekend? Come on.
No, I think I'm going to pass. Even though I love The Rock, I can't sit through
Am I
it in
the
the
only one that
theater.
hasn't seen
You
Moana
can't.
1?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It all depends when your kids are young. That's the characters you're into.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Down here, 45,000.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, it looks like America's economy heading toward the new year in pretty good shape. Third quarter economic output, it gained at 2.8% rate as consumer spending registered this year's biggest gain. Let's get to the stock market. We have the NASDAQ down 0.3% or 61 points. The Dow up 0.1%, 85 points. We have the S&P 500 down about 3 points. The two-year yield, 4.21%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.25%. And that's down 5 basis points. To currencies, we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.5%. The Japanese yen up about more than 1%. The euro and the British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin up 3%, around 94,000. Shares of cybersecurity company CrowdStrike Holdings, well, they're down about 4% on that disappointing earnings forecast. And here's a stock certainly on the move. Shares of Symbotic down 34%. It cut its first quarter revenue forecast, but here's the thing. It said it was unable to file its annual filing due to accounting errors, so problems there. And then BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street being sued by a group of states that are led by Texas for alleged antitrust violation. They're accused of boosting electricity prices through their investments. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is a joy. I can't say enough, and this goes back 20 years, how I delegate all the booking to people smarter than me, really working hard, and I have no idea tick to tick who's next. It's like Ian Bremer shows up and it's like, oh, really? What a joy and honor to have Dana Telsey in studio right now here as we slide into the holiday season. She lived the fabric of retail New York City. The other day, Milan, Dana Telsey, I guess is bigger now than Fifth Avenue, but there's still Fifth Avenue dominant. On Fifth Avenue, Louis Vuitton is blowing up the building. What are they going to build? What is the Arnault family going to build at 57th Street and Fifth Avenue?
Well, it's going to be amazing. And Tom, thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. But let's talk about and show people what they're doing on Fifth Avenue. Trunks that go up 7 stories tall as they encapture the building so that they tear it down and build it up again. It's a 7-year build. And across the street, they have the Louis Vuitton store in the former Tiffany temporary store
where
also.
Tiffany was,
So it's going to be, what I hear, office, and it's going to be an amazing retail store. When you think about what opened in Paris, it feels like that's going to be New York. And when you look at what everyone's doing, the social media that's going on of everyone taking pictures of those trunks, whether tourists or locals, it's absolutely awesome.
Okay. To me, the absolute seismic change is, Paul, I can enjoy for $24,600 the Alhambra secret pendant watch.
Nice.
At Van Cleef across the street.
You know it well.
Through a firm. This to me is ginormous in that luxury's finally getting the way Americans shop.
I think there's some of that. I think some of it's unique to Van Cleef also. I think some brands like Hermes, you're only seeing it walk in and out of the store and online where you need that relationship with that sales associate. But companies like the Bergdorf Goodmans and other luxury brands, they're innovating for today because they need the shopper who's going to be there tomorrow also.
All right, so Tom's shopping at Van Cleef and whatever, blah, blah. What are the rest of us doing? How are retail sales going to be? How is holiday shopping shaping up this year?
I think the holiday season is going to be respectable. Okay. When you think about the increase, could it be 3 to 3.5% versus 4.6% last year? You have a couple of ticks and ties. A compressed holiday season, 5 fewer days. I don't know about you, but whether it's my texts or my emails, I'm getting discounts galore of what the promotions are going to be. So it will be more promotional this year than last year. And, you know, experiences still matter. You look at people now going out to dinner, look at travel, which has shown huge increases. It's important to say the wow factor. And what else is going to work? Whether it's the closed-toed shoes at Birkenstock, whether it's the value of the off-pricers, TJX and Walmart. Look where Walmart's biggest gains are coming from, some of their higher-income consumers.
Did the retailers have what they need on the shelves? Are they fully stocked? Are they ready to go?
I think they're ready to go. I think they've been ready to go.
Okay.
Definitely tariffs, when you think about the future, that's an impact. Everyone's tried to diversify their exposure to China, but look, it's coming on other places now too. At the end of the day, whatever these tariffs will be, there's only so much retailers can absorb themselves, and that will be a headwind for consumers if prices move up.
Joseph I. Feldman has killed it on Walmart. He's not alone. But mere mortals like me, Dana, look at Walmart with a 35 multiple and go, I didn't learn this from Dana Telsey at Bear Stearns a million years ago. How do you justify the price to earnings, price to cash flow, price to sales ratio of revenue growers of 5% per year?
One of the things that you have to look at, when going back to my Ron Barron days, who is my mentor, who I learned from, the competitive moat that a business develops gives them the opportunity to scale. Look what Walmart is doing. Walmart today is not the Walmart of yesterday. You look at their other revenues from other business lines that are growing extensively. Look at their 60% of sales that are coming from essentials. And frankly, look what they're doing with both the digital channel and the physical channel, coupled with what they've got globally. So what Doug McMillon has done has moved the business forward, and that competitive moat is only getting stronger.
What is the e-commerce versus in-store ratio these days? I mean, I know the pandemic kind of pulled a lot of that market share towards e-commerce. Are we reset at a new normal here?
I think overall, look what Nordstrom reported yesterday. Around 34% of their sales came from e-commerce. Wow. You still have faster growth in e-commerce because it's smaller than what you have in physical. But one of the things that's happened, the pandemic allowed the physical channel to reset. And it allowed the physical channel to reset because they closed stores, and now they're investing in their stores. Look at the new flagships that are opening here in New York. Aritzia is one of the stores I'm going to tomorrow because they just opened their new store in Soho.
Oh, would you like to step in here, Lisa?
Lisa, you can tag along with
Those and the closed-toe Birkenstocks, we are set.
Exactly. You're going to buy your puffer at Aritzia and wear your closed-toe Birkenstocks.
What's your single best idea? I mean, the charm of Dana Telsey is the chit-chat on women's boots, but also we got to make money. Do you make money with a value trap now that's finally going to turn around and move, or do you go on board something that's already moving? What's your single best idea?
I want to go what's moving and working. I want to look at Ralph Lauren. I want to look at Birkenstock. I want to keep going with TJX. That's where I think some of the winners are.
Minute and a half, ample amount of time on Bloomberg Surveillance. How does Dana Telsey turn around the train wreck that is Doc Martens?
A lot of work to do. It all comes to product. What are they going to put out that's going to capture the awareness of the consumer that goes on social media in order to drive interest? They're not there yet, and Birkenstock is.
You know where she got some of her training back in the day? C.J. Lawrence. Again, going to our theory, Tom and I have about C.J. Lawrence, some of the best research analysts for decades came out of the shop C.J. Lawrence nobody knows about.
You grew up as a child, a magical childhood. It's literally like Eloise at the Plaza at Bergdorf Goodman. Where is Bergdorf Goodman in 10 years?
I think we're still going to have a Bergdorf Goodman today. I think the relationships and the partnerships with designers are more important than ever. But you know what else matters? Service. I think when I think about 2025 and beyond, I'm about the letter S. Service and social. I think service matters to keep the customer there. I think social matters because you have to engage, whether digitally or physically, and really shows the personalization.
Did you see the new look on Apple TV, the magical movie about Dior?
I'm going to go check it out. That'll be part of my tomorrow.
Dior, Dior, you should see them over on Fifth Ave. They're putting up this light show right now. It's like $1 gajillion in that. What's Mr. Arnault do next? What does Mr. Arnault purchase?
That'll be very interesting to see what he purchases. You heard that, given he purchased a little bit of Montclair, that Montclair was potentially looking at Burberry. And I would have thought Mr. Arnault would purchase Bergdorf because I think that would allow him to have all four corners of 57th Street.
Oh.
She brings the conversation at a bar to a complete halt.
I'm telling
Dana
you.
Telsey, honored to have you in here. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving. She's iconic, of course. The Telsey Advisory Group, and it's not just Dana, Joe Feldman writing her as well. Big box all the way over to a firm at the luxury provider of your choice. Red and green on a screen here, an important conversation at 10 o'clock. Paul Sweeney with a cast of characters to bring you the key economic data that we will see here in 4 minutes. Happy Thanksgiving.